Here we are. Um, Getting started a bit early today, like I said in the tweet, because the debate that I wanted to watch today is a bit of a longer one. It is Vaush, man who goes by many names, versus Sargon of Akkad. Figure of the what some people in more conventional circles might know as the intellectual dark web, or whatever. Kind of apt, seeing as they appear to be black holes of all intellectual anything. Oops, this is slightly out of proportion there. I think that's about as good as I'll get it. There we go. But yes, anyways. Let's start it up. And I will be playing Melee on the side. I'm going to try to keep the audio levels to such a point that you can hear me playing and me talking and the debate. And hopefully it doesn't get too overbearing for one or the other.
Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another...
I'm going to turn this up a little bit.
Epic debate as we have two major heavyweights in the YouTube political debate world.
So that way it's a little bit quieter than me.
Heavy hitters, folks. This is going to be a lot of fun.
By the way, shoutouts to this fella's name is James. He does has a platform called Modern Day Debate. I do not know him personally, but I've seen debates that he has hosted, moderated, facilitated, etc. He is very good at it, and he does a great service, so you guys should check him out as well if you feel like it. But yes, just know that when you see this fella, you are in for a good debate, a certified banger, if you will.
So if this is your first time here, by the way, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debate.
We'll start with Captain Falcon. It's a Captain Falcon kind of day.
Including, you'll see on the bottom right of your screen, this March in person, we're going to have Destiny and Vosh crossing swords. That's going to be a big one, likely.
Oh, that's right. This is a little bit before that all happened. So
in Los Angeles, going to be a lot of fun, and that will be streamed here at Modern Day Debate. With that, want to let you know, folks, our guests here today have their links in the description. So if you're listening and you're like, I like that, good news. Their links are conveniently located just below, just down there. See? And this is going to be a great one, folks. If you have any questions, just shoot them into the live chat. And if you can tag me with @ModernDayDebate, it'll help me see each question. Super chats will go to the top of the list for the Q&A and also give you a chance to make a comment toward one of the speakers. However, they, of course, will get the chance to respond.
By the way, those alert sounds, the default alert, those are for Vosh. I think back in the day he had those default alert sounds. I actually have different alerts now. So, just so you know, just to clear up a little bit of confusion.
And I would love to ask you, please, if you could keep it as kind as possible to our debaters. Definitely challenge your ideas, but if you can get those personal attacks that get a round in the chamber ready to fire, fire it at me. I don't mind. But we do want to honor our guests as we appreciate them being on Modern Day Debate today. So, with that, this is just civil discourse, folks. No time sections, just low stakes, easy-going convo. We'll see. Let's see.
Very nice.
It's going to be a good one.
Very
so
lo-fi, low stakes.
Open this up to everybody. So thanks so much. Oh goodness gracious! I just realized the names. Thanks so much. The live chat let me know that the names are flopped on the watch list. So thanks. I'm switching it over right now. Good eye, everybody. And with that, very embarrassing. Okay, with that, gentlemen, thanks so much again.
Oh, James, you're so humble.
I have got it swapped, so we are all set and ready. The floor is all yours, gentlemen. If there's a particular issue either of you especially wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I feel like it's my personal opinion. If we're going to be discussing broad extent economic and social issues, introducing socialism and capitalism,
I'm totally deferring to you guys. So I'm happy with it. Carl, if you're going to...
Sorry, I didn't realize you were asking me. Sorry, say again.
okay. Do you mind at all beginning with socialism and capitalism?
No, it's fine.
All right.
Okay, I know I'm pausing it early, but I think it's very important that Vosh picked this topic to start because the right wing has historically been very unpopular on economic issues, which is why, Sargon is a right winger. And I think starting off with more economic issues, you know, is a good way to start from the left of center perspective because right wing policies such as reducing the amount of regulations that there are in corporations, reducing taxes on very high earners, that sort of thing, are not very popular, and giving more power to the workers, even though this came out a couple years ago in early 2020, has been growing increasingly popular. We've seen with things like unionization, but either way, definitely a good choice to start on this topic from Vosh's end. Although, obviously this is not to say sneaky debate tactic. No, him and Sargon both agreed to this. I just think that, good choice.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take the first opening. So, with regards to social, I'm terribly sorry.
I didn't prepare a sort of an intro.
Oh no, I didn't either. It's all off the cuff.
That's fine.
Nice and casual. So, with regards to socialism, a lot of images get conjured in people's minds when we discuss socialism. When I think of socialism, I think of simple, elegant market socialism, a simple solution to democratize the workplace in our country. Of course, I'm from America, that's what I usually talk about, but any country, I think, could be a fair beneficiary of this policy. And the reason for that is...
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think your connection might be a bit... I think your connection a little bit robotic at the moment.
So can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's my connection. Yeah, I'm just closing down the browser.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that.
I've
This is going to be a recurring thing. There's going to be some technical difficulties. I have a feeling that's kind of what contributes to it being
Do you want to take a moment to
really
reset your
long as well. Of course, the bad connection is not a slight to Sargon. There are plenty more substantive things that you can invoke against him.
Sometimes what happens is, if we have to, it's okay to turn off the video, and that might kind of help it catch up. And as long as people are all here to hear the ideas, I think, even though we don't get to see your face, getting to hear those
Yeah, no,
ideas.
I think it'll be fine. I think it's because I have... you know how it is.
Boomer internet behavior. It's
I'll
okay, I do this sometimes as well. Like, I have a bunch of tabs.
Sorry, well, well, I heard what I think of social. So, big one.
Of course. So hopefully that works. If not, we can look again with the other video. Whatever the case may be, when I think about socialism, a bunch of things get conjured in people's heads. Vuvuzela, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh. What I'm talking about, very simply, is the democratization of the workplace, the publicization or the deprivatization of firms. Essentially, if you work at a place, you have collective ownership of that place. This is essentially a worker co-op. This isn't some, vast theoretical economic implementation.
Well, let me ask you a question then.
Of course.
Why should anyone agree to that?
Well, it would be in the best interest of the...
I kind of want to respond. I'm going to let Vosh go a little bit here, but there is something I want to respond to with that.
vast majority of people in this country, because it would lead to a change in the power hierarchy between workers and owners.
Well, I disagree, because as we saw last time, half of the businesses in your country are small businesses.
What does that have to do with anything?
So, okay. Now might be a good time to get this started. They go down the discussion route of, like, small businesses and stuff and what that entails. But what Vosh described was like, hey, socialism would be really, like, you could think of it as simply as just establishing every business as a worker co-op, where in a worker co-op, the workers, the people working at the establishment, vote on a course of action when when it's deemed appropriate by everybody. It is like a smaller democracy, and Sargon's response was immediately, "Why would anyone agree to that?" Which is just, first of all, it's an argument against democracy, but it also kind of falls flat on its face because, well, in a democracy, you all agree to it. That's how you define a democracy. That's why people would agree to it. But yeah, now I'm gonna let this get back on track.
Well, that means that they're just small guys like me who can employ a few guys as well, a few people as well. And what you're saying is, it's actually, as soon as I employ anyone, they're a part owner of what I'm doing, which means I'm not going to...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, below a certain level, there is a... Vosh brings this up later as well, from what I remember. But there is a level of nuance where, like, if a business is so small, maybe you don't need it to be a co-op, like less than 10 people. Because everybody at that point is a pretty significant part of the operation anyways. But basically what Sargon is arguing in favor of here is the system where a business owner is a king with a petty kingdom of subjects who work for them. And it is a money-making operation. That is the traditional business model, and so what Sargon is doing by saying, "Oh, the poor business owners," is he is defending the arbitrary right to rule of kings, of monarchs, and I think we can all agree that monarchy is cringe, especially when the monarchs have any appreciable degree of power.
For one, the fact that there are a certain number of small businesses in the country has nothing to do with the statistic of how many workers work for small businesses.
Oop.
It may well be that 50% of the businesses in this country are small, but 90% of the workers in this country work for larger businesses. Larger businesses will, of course, have more.
Yeah, there we go. And ultimately what I was saying really doesn't matter because people working in businesses classified as small businesses are a pretty small minority of people in America. Which, of course, is, this debate largely centers around the U.S. and the U.K. because Vosh is American and Sargon is British. That's just kind of the nature of things.
Even so, small businesses are
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all.
Sure, well,
but
we
even
can
if that was true...
Oh, no, wait, actually, that's right. It's not 10%. It's something like a third, a little bit more than a third. Still a minority, and we're talking about almost a clean 2/3 of Americans working at large businesses, which is actually, I'll just let them hash it out here because they get to the meat of the matter probably better than I could.
Even if that was true, it doesn't matter, does it? Because the point is, it's not just for someone to simply, because they are given a job, they voluntarily take a job to have ownership of something they don't have ownership and they're not entitled to.
So your original point was that the prevalence of small...
Okay. Right off the bat, I don't know if this properly gets addressed either. It's kind of fine that it didn't, but I object to Sargon's characterization of this as voluntarism because it is, it's like a bad choice in a sea of bad choices or whatever. Just because you had an array of options in front of you and picked an option doesn't mean that's what you wanted to do necessarily, right? Because for example, in the labor market where most firms are traditional, quote unquote, traditional businesses, very hierarchical and stuff, you don't get to work, vote on stuff. You don't have the agency, you don't have the real choice to pick a workplace where you would have some sort of impact on how things go there. So the real answer is that no, getting a job somewhere is not voluntary. First, because you have to work to survive in the United States. Really messed up, I think, that if you don't work, you could just starve to death and the government wouldn't care. But then also, when you do work, you effectively don't have the choice to work in a place that would have like good working conditions. You could have all bad choices in front of you, and there's nothing you could do about it. And that's not terribly voluntary.
Small businesses was in any way relevant to this. apparently 60 million Americans work for small businesses, which is approximately 25%.
There's a lot of people, though.
30% of the workforce. Again, though, whether or not...
How big do you think the American workforce is?
Well, we can check.
It's like 200 million, right? No, it's like 150 million, 170. I don't know.
157 million.
Okay, so
That's pretty big. That's like half the U.S. population,
so about 35%
just about.
work for small businesses. And a small
quite a large
business is
percentage.
defined as, let me see,
Less than 500%.
less than 500 workers.
Less than 500?
I don't know about
Damn.
you, but I think a firm with 500 workers
Well,
is one in which there is a significant disparity between the number of owners and workers at that given firm.
Every firm has a
it's got to be said. I think based on Vosh's reaction, I think he would agree to this. That like the definition of small business really, in legalese, leaves a lot to be desired, because a business that has 400 something workers would still be classified as a small business, but like that's a considerable amount of people. That's enough that you would have like a chain and several different like franchises and whatever, Okay, well, this stage kind of fucks with the AI, I guess.
significant disparity.
That's a lot for one business.
Why worker co-ops
Then
are
why
the best
bring it up?
interest.
Like here's an example. Pandemic Studios, unfortunately now defunct. They made some cool stuff, including a little game called Star Wars Battlefront 2, released in 2005 for PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 2 or 3, I think. Very popular game, considered, I think, a AAA title in some circles, because it was basically a copy of Battlefield, which is a AAA title. Pandemic Studios had just under 300 employees, if I'm remembering right. So they were still a small business. Small businesses are some of the businesses that are producing, like, the hit video games. Indie developers, it's some of the larger indie developers, still, quote-unquote, small businesses. And, of course, gaming and the tech industry are not known for the worker rights.
I agree. The number of small businesses out there is completely irrelevant to my point.
No, it's the number of workers that each business employs is actually relevant.
The only businesses that could conceivably have a case against worker co-ops would be ones with 2 or 3 people working there, and I agree. Those businesses, for bureaucratic reasons, probably don't need to be named worker co-ops, but the vast majority of Americans do not work for places that only employ 2 or 3 people. The vast majority of Americans work for large firms where they don't know the owner of the establishment.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm glad we
That's
agree.
not a state of affairs that needs
Yeah, once you actually, this is a really good point before Vosh was interrupted, that once you start getting to the territory of like 100 or hell even like 50 people, you can't really know everybody in your workplace, much less the boss, because the boss is usually like the least accessible part of that. So just another little logical bit to show that, yeah, even small businesses aren't exempt from this, from the oppression of the boss and capitalism or whatever.
needs rectifying by socialism.
Okay, so the initial point you brought up about small businesses was completely irrelevant then to worker co-ops. It was
I'm gonna go fix something right quick.
nothing to do then
No, it
with the
means you're
central
going to
point.
kill a third, at the
Kill?
very least, you'll kill a third of your businesses. Because
What-
I'm not hiring someone if they are entitled to a part ownership of my business.
Okay, here. This is really stupid. So Sargon in his brain is trying to have it both ways at the same time. First he's saying that this would kill all small businesses. Demonstrably false. You're just changing those businesses from traditional firms into co-ops. They still exist. They will most likely continue to exist and possibly even thrive better. Co-ops have been shown to be more stable than traditional firms. But also, he's saying, well, then the way you would kill them, which wouldn't happen, is because then I as the boss wouldn't want to hire anybody if they get part ownership of the firm. He assumes that he still keeps his position as the boss and maintains a level of authority in the business that would be comparable with the boss, which would not be the case. There would be a process where people vote or, debate or come to a consensus of like, okay, this is our new hiring process. This group of people, like this committee, or maybe this, this person, we vote and say they will deal with certain hiring matters. Yeah, no, he's using the, like, he's trying to have it both ways in an attempt to strawman worker co-ops, which is just dumb on many different levels.
Business. That's
I
why
don't know.
I'm paid.
I don't know what we're talking about killing.
You
I'm
will
not. Do you know what a
kill
worker co-op
a
is?
third of the jobs in the United States.
Wait.
Yes.
So a firm with 500 people would be killed if it was
One viewer.
made
Welcome to the
law
stream.
that businesses be cooperatively owned. You do realize
Yeah,
you
no
wouldn't
one's
be
gonna hire
making the hiring decisions if you own such a firm.
Yeah, there we go.
Worker co-op, right? That would be democratically decided by the workers. Do you know how worker co-ops work?
Yes, but if I'm the business and a bunch of people are suddenly going to be one day my employees.
By the way, he never answers this, I don't think. Vosh asks, do you know how worker co-ops work? It might have been a jab or just a clarifying question. Either way, Sargon doesn't answer it, which makes me think he either doesn't know or like that's inconvenient to his argument.
And the next day, my co-bosses in the business might have different opinions.
Who cares what your opinions are? Everyone's opinions
Well,
matter.
True.
It's a democracy.
Yes, I know, but what I'm saying
True.
is my opinion will generally reflect the trend among small business owners. because they have the
Yeah,
same-
so?
Yes, owners. But most people work. They do not own. And I'm interested in improving the well-being of most people in this country. Most
At
people in this
different
country.
times in their lives, they do different.
Yeah, monarchs tend to not like the idea of getting rid of their power in favor of a democratic system, which, in my opinion, is a non-starter. Like, who cares? You're the monarch. You don't get a say, or rather, you only get as much say as the next guy.
Things.
Most people in this country do not own businesses of 500 workers or more.
True.
And they never will.
Yes?
Yeah, nobody should
Much in the
own
same
that.
way that I'm
What?
not
What the fuck?
fond of
Yeah, it's like I don't think anybody should own the labor of 5 people, much less 500. Like, Jesus, when you go to a business, when you work somewhere, you're selling your labor. They have ownership of your work. That's how capitalism works. That's how earning a wage or salary at like a capitalist business works.
slave owners and tradesmen with lords and serfs, I think that moving towards an economic system which doesn't have the vast majority of people made subservient to the business interests of an incredibly small minority is a great way to move forward. I'm popular with that. I want to improve the lives of most people.
Voluntarily exchanging your labor for money.
By the way, this is really smart too, because Vosh now has I know he's also genuinely a populist, but this has to be to a degree on purpose, invoking the populist label here, because now he's basically put Sargon into the position of having to argue for anti-populist anti-populist arguments, anti-populist policies. And populism is when you appeal particularly to the economic angst of the common man. It's like if you have the image of the political activist on the soapbox and everybody's like listening to him and emphatically agreeing, that is an appeal to populism, an appeal directly to the masses against the the elite or whoever.
Exchange for whatever labor you're being asked to do justifies stealing the businesses of
Stealing
half of
the business?
people who earn them.
Do you think taxes are theft? Okay. Then you agree that
But
the
why don't you
government
stay on
has the
top of
right.
it? You are appropriating their property because of your
Yeah, taxes.
inferiority.
Yeah, you're appropriating their property with taxes. Do you think taxes are theft?
Do you not understand?
Okay, so flawless argument as far as I'm aware. But he doesn't get to finish it. Sargon interrupts him a lot. I mean, they do some interrupting back and forth, but Sargon, I think, more so. The argument here is that, so Sargon initially said, oh, you'd be stealing the business, which is a moral term. Stealing is a moral term, which implies that, the person who originally has the thing and then no longer has it has been morally wronged. They were in the right to have that thing. But appropriating a business to then equally distribute it among everybody is not a morally wrong action. In fact, I would consider it to be morally good. Same with modern schemes of taxation, where money is taken, appropriated from people, and then redistributed to them through, government apparatuses for things like social services, infrastructure, and that. And so Vosh is drawing the parallel between, like, well, wait a minute, taking the business from the business owner and then redistributing it among the workers is exactly the same thing we do with tax money. We take a little bit of everybody's wealth and then we redistribute it among everybody so that ideally the poor people in society are a bit less poor. And if the rich are slightly less rich, who cares, because they can afford that. But he doesn't get to finish that argument, I don't think.
You're not on for taxes.
Do you think there is a fundamental
No,
difference?
don't answer my question. Don't answer the question. Answer my question. Do you understand that redistributing the ownership of a business to other people, whether they work there or not, is not just?
So it's not theft.
Okay. Two things. I already addressed the is not just part, but then also whether or not they work there. It's like, what does he think we're gonna like take every single business immediately and distribute it to every single worker, irrespective of whether or not they work at that business? No, that's patently unrealistic. Even if eventually we get to a world where we can do that or whatever, I don't know how that would look. I don't think anybody knows how that would look. That's clearly not feasible, and we shouldn't do that because it would be a disaster. And that's not what Vosh was saying.
To take millions
Another straw man.
of dollars from an entity or a firm. But it is theft, then, to reassign... Wait, because you don't believe taxes are theft. Do you believe
Why are you
taxes
even
theft?
asking questions? Why can't you just answer my
What are
question?
you...
It's
I'm
perfectly
asking...
simple.
So, wait. Yes or no? Do you believe taxes are theft?
I'm the one asking the question.
You can't... You earlier said no, so I'm going to assume that's
No,
what
I
you
do
mean.
not believe taxation is theft.
Wonderful. I'm so glad we agree on that, Carl. I agree.
Okay,
I think that...
to the host, look, man, I'm not interested in
Backing out already?
Ooh,
Just asking you for a
okay. Right here, Sargon already has lost the debate. The moment he's like, I'm not interested in debating you. It's only been 12 minutes of them conversing. So a significant chunk of which was trying to hash out technical difficulties, which nobody's at fault for. So let's call it like 10 and a half minutes. And Sargon already, because he's trapped in the box of wealth redistribution good, but wealth redistribution bad, it's like it's good when it gets distributed up. He's now saying like, well, I don't want to have this conversation. And he's trying to leverage the power of the moderator because he's used to debate spaces where it's all right-wing people ganging up on one smaller, left-wing creator. But that's not what's happening.
By asking you if you believe tax or theft, Carl.
know exactly what
It's
Carl, already?
You're not listening what I'm saying. You're not listening and you're what I'm saying.
Carl.
It is immoral to take... See you.
Well, hold on one sec. I think we can try to mend it. Like I can play
How
more
about we do
active
this?
role.
How about we do this? If I'm explaining something,
No, obviously. Okay. This is a huge tell as well. Because he didn't say, like, you can mute me when Vosh is explaining something. He just wants to mute Vosh and steamroll him.
I just
guys-
asked if you believe taxes are
you
theft.
guys are-
I started talking and then you started interrupting me.
But you don't believe taxes are theft.
I'm
One
not
second,
wasting
one
my
second.
time
Bosh.
with you, Bosh. I've got a video to edit.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind getting an early night.
Dude, it's okay.
So,
If this was too
if
much
you
for
can
you,
be
we can
quiet when I'm
reassign
Bosh,
to
talking,
another
or-
day.
and we can have a
Bosh.
conversation. But if not, I'm not having a repeat of last time. You understand?
If we can, I promise. I think we can make it work. And I know that you guys are very passionate, and so if we just
It's
if
true.
we're willing to take just a moment, and I promise. Oh gosh, am I muted?
No, you sound fine. We can take a second to
we
calm
can
down.
hear
What we'll do is let's just take a moment. I promise, Vosh, we'll come right back to you. But if we just have this question come out from Carl, and then Vosh, I promise we'll come right back to you. And just kind of, I'll be strict about kind of moving in to be sure that no one stops anybody before they're done. In fact, if you guys are willing, we could even try this. Once in a while we do this, is if you're willing to, if we wait for each other to say done with that point.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I love it.
By the way, James handles this like a champ. You know, because what he's most concerned about here is making sure the conversation flows smoothly and that people are getting the the fair chance to articulate and refute each other's points. Great stuff by him.
I love giving everyone a chance. Carl, please take all the time.
His giga chattedness is showing. Very based and civil pilled debate moderator. Of course, I don't mean like in the sense of civility politics. I just mean in the sense of like giving everybody the best possible shot that they can get.
I will. Thankfully, I don't need to. Basically, just because you work somewhere doesn't give you an entitlement to be a part owner. It's someone else's labour that got
Morally, yes, it does.
the business into the condition that it.
Because then when you leave, you no longer work there, so you're no longer part owner of the firm or whatever. You go on somewhere else.
Was when we were ready to be able to hire you. You voluntarily accepted the job. You've got an entitlement here. You're just socialist who, frankly, I think is afraid of the fact.
Grasping greedy socialists. That's a new one. I've heard socialists be impugned for many things, like wanting free handouts and stuff like that. But greedy's a new one.
The fact that some parts of life require hardship. That's just it.
Okay.
Done.
Thanks so much. And then go ahead, Vosh. We'll give you a chance to defend.
So I will ignore the.
Yeah, somebody in chat, in Vosh's chat, did put it aptly where the triple parentheses were around greedy socialists. He does, like, I don't know, he might be too dumb to realize this, but so much of what he's saying is like one step removed from anti-Semitic dog whistling. Sargon, that is.
The baseless ad hominem there. I don't know why Carl felt fit to include that, but I'm a utilitarian. I like instituting social change that benefit people and make life better for most people. Sometimes passing laws is part of that. There have been many points in the glorious tradition of Western political theory that we have, sometimes even violently, instituted massive paradigm shifts in how we operate in government. The transition away from monarchy, for example, was not a peaceful one. I'm not advocating for violence. I'm only saying that far more severe things have been done.
Yeah, by the way, this is really good framing from Vosh. He appeals to the sort of glorious Western European tradition of being based and socialist and anti-monarchy pilled or whatever, which then leads to Sargon in a minute here defending monarchy or attacking small r Republican revolution, which is another kind of like, oof, not a good look.
Than a law being passed to make cooperative ownership, mandated in firms of a certain size in this country. Then when I'm
yeah, by the way, this is also true. I like rewatching this. I was kind of reminded. Yeah, it really would be that easy. You could pass like a single law saying like, okay, we're transitioning to programs of like. Every company basically now has to be some form of worker self-directed enterprise where like the workers own the company and vote on its core like decision-making matters or whatever. Basically, every company has to be democratically operated. You could do that basically with one law. You'd have to phase it in because it's a significant change from what we do currently, but it would not, I don't think, require a violent revolution or whatever in the logistical sense. Now, in the sense of generating the political will to do so, it might require a bit of civil unrest because a lot of people in power are the same kind of like business owners who would have a personal stake in seeing this not become the case. But, it is a score one for reformist socialism, I think. even though I also think that sometimes reformism isn't enough, this is one case where it actually would be.
Advocating for here. To be perfectly specific, Carl, you're just you voluntarily chose to work here. Oh, such and such. This could be used to defend indentured slavery or indentured service.
There we go. Yep. This is. I think this is what I'm saying. What I was saying earlier, where like you have a choice, but you don't really have a choice.
My apologies. This could be used to defend child labor in coal mines. You could use this to defend all sorts of miserable.
Yep.
I don't see fit to consign.
In fact, capitalists in the 19th century did defend indenture contracts, and well, actually, indenture contracts are coming back in the form of traps, which is an acronym. But you know, in the 19th century, when this was more widely practiced, capitalists would defend that, and also child labor with that same argument that, like, hey, they chose to work here, when the alternative to working at a business where you would have to like do child labor is your family starves to death. So
The majority of Americans, or whatever country we're talking about, to a miserable, wretched, poverty-laced existence just because the prior laws made it such that it was legal for them to be put in that situation, or they will starve. Because, of course, that's always the bludgeon we're hit with. You know, if you don't work, you live in miserable subsistence existence.
damn, I should really just shut up and let Vosh talk. He made the same argument.
I want to make life better. Worker co-ops seem to make life better for most Americans.
Thanks so much, Raj. Kick it back to Carl.
Very well put.
To make life better for most Americans, why aren't they the overwhelming business model?
Classic. Okay, this is actually a staple of conservatism, more so than anything specific to Sargon. He just happens to be, I think, stating it more overtly than a lot of people who would share similar opinions. Basically, he says what every conservative to us more or lesser degree thinks, which is that, well, if this is the way it is, then certainly there's a good reason that it ought to be this way, you know, and if this is not the way things are, then there certainly has to be a good reason why things are not like this. There's not always a good reason.
I don't agree that I mean, you can't just say the transition away from monarchy. Europe is still ruled by monarchs. And all of the revolutions of the 20th century...
No. England is ruled by a monarch. Sweden and Finland and Denmark, I think, are ruled by monarchs. As far as other countries go, no. Outside of, I think, like, the Netherlands. It's like some of the smallest countries in Europe have monarchs, and the rest are republics. Italy is a republic, Germany is a republic, France is a republic, Belgium is a republic. Spain is still a monarchy, I think, which is regrettable. You know, Hungary, despite their backsliding, is still technically a republic. Yeah, I don't think I need to go on.
Century were horrific bloodbaths that failed. So I don't think that citing them as, oh, we can do this because they did it. I actually think that's a warning away from passing a law to have cooperative ownership of businesses. That will have significant effect from the 48% of businesses in the country that are owned by people.
I'll pass the ledge, I guess.
Stolen. Indentured servitude, child labour, etc., are not voluntary, they are coercive. I can't believe you didn't know that.
Okay, see, this is a point where I think Sargon is just dumb. Like, he's kind of being bad faith as well, but, like, Vosh was saying, like, oh, you know, what about child labor? That's certainly voluntary, isn't it? It was a bait, you know. He's trying to get Sargon to acknowledge that, well, no, those things are not voluntary, they are coercive, because at the end of the day, the same things that make indenture and child labor coercive are also the things that make just regular wage and salary labor coercive. And so, you know, but he butts it. He either is like biting the bait or doesn't even recognize it as like him Vosh being facetious, which I mean that happens. You know, sometimes people with a dry wit, it's kind of hard to tell.
There will always be people who are less well off than others because that is the default state of freedom. However,
I'm
you have to be honest,
okay.
there are ways that people get their way out of it, and there are even things that we can do to incentivize and help people to be able to pull themselves out of poverty. But if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it is
I actually didn't need a knee there.
prosperity. So, taking from some and hypothetically giving to others is simply going to end up with, honestly, I think it's just going to end up as a repeat, as socialism always does. It's the same as
Yeah, that was actually really impressive. There were so many stupid points that were made there, I actually had to write them down. Because after the first two, I thought, like, okay, I have the answers to these, and then I had to... Okay, so first of all, so I like Carl's suggestion that there isn't an inherently coercive element to the need to work in our society. You suggest
And there we go.
that child labor was coercive. I don't see how. They didn't have to work. They were prompted into working due to the financial need of the family. That's why people work today. The coercion element is equally present in both of those cases, but we agreed nonetheless.
There we go. I think this might be a little bit of a problem with old school Vaush being quite a bit edgier. And I say problem loosely here, you know, because he's still making all the correct points and has the correct political positions, according to me. It's just that, like, you know, clip out of context, whatever. It's just probably this argument would have been a little bit more effectively made if he just left the part out where he facetiously says, like, oh, I don't see how child labor is coercive. You know, he could just say that they're both equally coercive, or kind of make it clear that he's being facetious by, like, adopting more of a tone shift, something like that. Again, dry wit, whatever. Not a huge criticism.
That somebody should step in and prevent children from being able to work because it makes society better.
I like back your knee.
Just quick, am I muted? Carl's coming close from
No, I think Carl just closed.
Oh, boy.
Okay, that's very good. Secondly, Carl asks, why isn't socialism already done if it's the best system? Well, the most ethical and effective system doesn't just magically come into place. Capitalism
It's
is
true.
better right now than monarchical, mercantile capitalism was, and it's better than the systems that existed before then. But capitalism didn't just magically appear at the beginning of human existence. You know, we had to work for that. Just because a system is good doesn't mean it already exists. If that was the case, under Sargon's logic, then feminism wouldn't exist, because he believes that feminism detracts from the sort of best state of society.
Not much for me to comment on
He
here.
doesn't feel it's necessary.
He's making
Why
these
does it
arguments
exist? Well,
pretty
obviously,
damn
these
well.
things are a little more complicated than that. And I'll leave it off on one point, which is Sargon said freedom means inequality. If you have freedom, you will invariably have inequality. And there will always be inequality, of course, of many types. There's no denying that.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is probably, like, I guess that, like, at the birth of every naive socialist, you know, just sort of starting out, is the dream of equality or whatever. It's a unfortunate bullet that we are going to have to just bite as, like, a collective political unit, like, as a society that, try as we might, there is always going to be some degree of inequality in the world which we live in, but that shouldn't be read as an argument to not try to eliminate that, because it's, like, still inequality is inequality, and everybody should be equal, all that. It's not always the worst thing in the world. Like, once you get to the point where we're, like, living in the hypothetical socialist utopia, it's okay if person A has, like, ever so slightly more than person B, because there's not really any meaningful difference as long as they are both equipped to live a long, healthy, and meaningful life. Just a small tidbit.
However, I think it's important to point out that this is an incredibly disingenuous and blasé way to hand-wave the suffering of millions.
Yeah, there we go.
And billions, maybe? You can't just
Yeah, billions.
excuse people suffering because you know suffering will always exist. You always have to try to make the world a better place.
That's unironically one of the coolest Falcon combos I've done.
Carl, are you still with us?
Did he disconnect?
Wait, his name does still show.
Maybe his
So-
cat chewed
Yeah,
on it.
sorry, I'm here.
Well, that's all right. No problem.
So, look, my son's been playing. My wife.
Oh, that's all right.
I'll be back in 5.
Oh, jeez.
James,
Yeah,
wait,
So,
he said he'll be back in 5 to 10. Can I?
yeah. That's unfortunate. In addition to technical difficulties, I had like the whole. My son wants to play. My wife is talking to me as well. Whatever. Irrespective of like, I don't think he did that on purpose. Like, that's just a hazard of like work sometimes. Sometimes my professors like their kids would show up on camera and be like, "Hey, say hi."
that he was like, even in a like, it's like I don't know. I like people who I like ideas. And at that time, it was like the start of modern day debate.
Yeah, James telling a little story here. What a Chad. Let's see here. I know it would be very entertaining to listen to this story, or for me listen to it again. But what I'm interested in here is reviewing this debate. So my deepest apologies, James. I'm gonna come back to Bosch and Sargon. I think he's.
What are you saying? Sorry.
We
All right, he's back. He's back.
Take a step back,
Nice.
probably. If we were to, what was the last thing you were in on?
Oh, I just made my point about the transition away from monarchy, laws being passed for co-op ownership, and how indentured servitude and child labor occurs.
Yeah, I guess I'll go because I responded to those, but I'll go over it again because obviously. So essentially, my issue with these comparisons are as such. For one, I strongly disagree with your assertion that revolution has all been like a bloody waste of time. As a Yank, I think I'm quite happy personally to be living away from the looming threat of monarchical domination. There are benefits sometimes to massive systemic changes. For example, the implementation of the Magna Carta.
God, I'm a little bit slow today in Melee.
Parliamentary democracy was also a system
Get out of here.
challenging the active. Don't you think it's immoral to take away people's private properties? At the end of the day, we're talking about the livelihood of millions of people in this country, hundreds of millions. The majority.
I just realized Vosh said there what I was saying earlier, which is like when he didn't say it as directly, but what I said earlier was like when you argue in favor of the business owner's moral right to keep their business, that is basically the equivalent of arguing in favor of the moral right of the monarch to rule over a country, just because they're the monarch or whatever. Yeah, let's continue.
Of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Some 40% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. This is in the wealthiest country in the world.
Come on.
That's disgusting.
Dang it.
Like that's repulsive. That's vile. It doesn't need to be that way. This isn't like some inevitable product of an economic, determinable condition. This is decisions that have been made by
Fancy.
people in power,
Damn it.
and we don't have any way to check that power because right now all the power in this country is concentrated amongst
that would've
the
been cool.
wealthy and the politicians, and the two of them get along very, very, very well. The only way to meaningfully return this country to a direction of democracy and egalitarianism and representing the rights of the average person is taking that power away from them. And I would say to anyone who believes that immoral, the same thing I would say to anyone who believes the days of slave owners were immoral, or the taking away the rights of the monarchs, or before them, the emperors and the kings that, ruled the ancient realms of the world. And I would say this, sometimes it is actually quite moral to take power and property away from people who are using that power and property to oppress, marginalize, and reduce the vast majority of the population. I stand by that very firmly.
Banger argument.
Right. The problem that we have with these comparisons, in my opinion, is that the comparisons that we make, all of the people who acquire property and wealth have problem you have in America and with billionaires is that I honestly can't point to a billionaire who got their money through legitimate means. I don't know. I mean, like, who did Mark Zuckerberg if the means
Yikes, argument.
fair, voluntary, they appear to have been
This is another thing that people do frequently when they don't have a coherent ethical framework, is they'll assume that the law is a good, like, moral or ethical framework. Because when Sargon is saying, like, oh, well, I don't know any billionaires who have gotten their wealth through illegitimate means. By illegitimate, he means illegal. Which even then isn't true, because a lot of billionaires are tax cheats. So right there's an illegitimate means by which billionaires have obtained wealth. But also, and I believe Vosh brings this up, like, feudal law justified the positions of the aristocrats and the kings as above the peasantry, and you know, every amount of wealth that they have was codified in law just about as being legitimate. Obviously, that doesn't mean that the laws were never broken still, but it's like sometimes laws are wrong, and that's the crux of why Sargon's argument is really just not good.
Then arbitrarily taking them away because you don't like the outcome, it's just going to. There's no way to perceive it that's not that unfair. So I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just I don't think we're going to take it. Hang on, I'm not finished.
Doesn't matter if you don't agree to it if everybody else does, right? Like, you're not, you know, the thing you're objecting to is not like the oppression of a protected class or whatever. It's, hey, we should appropriate property from billionaires to redistribute it so that everybody can enjoy a bit of that wealth.
The revolutions in Europe were a bloody waste of time. They were unbelievably bad. You can crow about the American Revolution, but that's...
Ah, yes. The classic debate tactic of, yes, actually, I was correct, and your refutation is just wrong. Usually, I mean, like, look, even if he, you know, if he believes this, it's understandable that he would do that. Of like, you know, well, no, my point was correct, you know. But sometimes in a debate, you can only go so long, like, providing the same argument and refutation of one point. So, I mean, it's best just to move on from that.
It was an English revolution. It was essentially an English civil war. So I'm not surprised it's that bloody, to be honest. If you look at the original English Civil War, that wasn't very bloody either, all things considered.
Talking about okay.
It doesn't discount the fact that all of the other revolutions have been terrible failures. It just shows the unique.
Demonstrably false. A lot of the revolutions were successes. Some of them were failures. A lot of the revolutions in 1848 kind of failed because that was the first time that they were dealing with statecraft of like that degree. Like, the state really brought the hammer down on a lot of democratic revolutions in 1848. But most of them even still were like partial successes. You know, like, I think France being the biggest example of this. Even, you know, in Germany, that revolution was associated with actually the rise of communism in the political discourse, as well as the emergence of nationalism as an idea, which at the time was revolutionary and to the left of what had come before it, because, you know, this new idea that, hey, everybody inside these national borders should have rights as a citizen of this country. That was a new thing. Before, it was like, well, you're a citizen, but you are an undesirable. And of course, nationalism still today is used to justify that attitude of you are a citizen and you are an undesirable. But, you know, back then it was a whole thing.
The English perspective, the indigenous perspective.
It was like Republican, small r Republican, small n nationalism.
Take them away if you ignore them, then you lose the structure and stability of that system, and then becoming like the continental that you are. You think like a German, and you want an American, an English outcome.
This is so stupid from from Sargon, unironically buying into the, like, well, as I said before, like, nationalist arguments of the national character of, like, essentializing, this is what all English people are like. This is what all American people are like. This is what all German people are like. Buddy, everybody's like everything in each different country. Like, there's so many different fucking factors.
You aren't gonna get it.
Okay, so I'm going to be perfectly honest. I have no idea what you were talking about. For a second, I was worried that I had, like, skipped a beat. I'm going to assume that was deliberately incoherent in an attempt to sort of jump me.
So why don't you just ask me what I meant?
Prescient points. You can clarify if you'd like when you have your time. The more prescient points are made. I don't know why I'm getting on revolutions here. I'm talking about very legal lawmaking. So I don't know how we sort of jumped to that point. I don't know how the American Revolution compared to criticize the English. But with all of that aside, your central criticism here is completely blunt. You say that the power achieved by those in power today was achieved through legitimate means. That's the exact same thing feudal lords would have said.
Yeah, there we go.
Exact same thing. By their standards, the power they had achieved was legitimate. Do you think that people went around for 1,000 years claiming your local lord, like their power was illegitimate? Of course not. And they could have said the same thing. To participate in the bounty of this monarchy, and then to complain about it just because you don't like that you're a serf and others are lords it's myopic, it's selfish. It's a nonsensical argument, Carl, and you have to know that. I'm talking about making the world a better place. The property rights of the lords were violated pretty substantially, mind you, in many European countries when we transitioned towards a democratic society, when we had the vast swaths of land they controlled being broken up and made municipal properties that were then zoned off into commercial areas. That was their property being seized.
I want to respond to that in a second.
A much, much better place. And it had nothing to do, by the way, with the serfs being mad at how things turned out, and had to do with the fact that the system was fundamentally unfair. As then, a very small number of people controlled all the political power and economic power in the country, we have today a system where a very small number of people control all the economic and political power. And it's interesting to me that in this discussion, which is ostensibly supposed to be about the benefits of worker co-ops or whatever, you seem intent with the very idea of fundamentally changing society, which is the most banal, boring, and spineless approach imaginable.
It's true.
Discussing political theory.
Yeah. Anyways, just a small response to one thing that Vosh said in there. It is broadly speaking, everything he said is true. Like, the one thing I wanted to touch upon was the, like, feudal lords having their property rights extensively violated during the transition from, like, landed aristocracy to, like, market capitalism and all that. What ended up happening is that, like, while some of the lords actually never recovered from that, more so what happened was on paper that, like, the properties were transferred to ownership of the state and all that. Like, oh, this is now part of the state municipal division. What a lot of aristocrats had done is they had kind of seen the change coming. They, like, saw the writing on the wall in a lot of instances, and they married into the then middle class of the bourgeoisie, the merchants. Like, in feudal Europe, you had, like, the nobility class, you had the merchant class, you had the serfs. As the merchants were up and coming into their, like, status as the wealthy, like, mostly, like, the most influential actors of the state, nobles married into that. So the nobles of yesterday not just are equivalent to, but literally are the merchant wealthy class of today. So the bourgeoisie today were previously the bourgeoisie and the feudal nobility yesterday. It's literally an example of a dialectic advancement. You had the thesis of the nobility, the antithesis of the feudal era bourgeoisie, and then their marriage was the synthesis of the modern bourgeoisie. So they're both of those rolled into one. Just a little bit of big brain theory to add to what Vosh is getting at here. But yeah, all of what he said is still largely correct. I just wanted to add that little bit because I thought that's good to know for a lot of people, because it's adds to the whole dynamic of like the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, okay. It's pretty bold of you, to be honest, that you don't understand what I've just said and you claim that my argument is incoherent. And you've just admitted.
I mean, that's logically follows. Like, I don't understand what you just said because it sounded incoherent. That's not like a gotcha. Whatever.
The difference is in English, liberalism is individualistic, German socialism is collectivist. This means that in English individualism, the individual owns his own property and his property rights matter. You are a German collectivist, so the individual is not their property, their property rights don't matter. If you can find a philosophical rationale to allow you to target a proportion of the population to persecute them, which I would say violating people's right to property is a form of persecution, then you are in fact no different to the tyrants of the 20th century. The only difference between you and them is scale. The idea you can't compare feudal lords to Mark Zuckerberg. Like, Zuckerberg achieved his prosperity through consent. They achieved theirs through violence. We do not consider violence a legitimate.
No, I gotta. Just a small thing. When just because you can't see the violence doesn't mean the violence doesn't exist. Mark Zuckerberg absolutely made and still makes his fortune today because of violence. Just recently, I mean, I know this came out a couple of years ago, but just recently, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, those groups were working with the Iranian government, to suppress the protests over there by shutting off access to their social media apps. Now, granted, after that, Iran shut off the internet entirely, but Mark Zuckerberg willingly, participated in acts of, albeit banal, political violence to maintain his property rights, his profits, and his bottom line. So, no, whenever somebody has that much wealth, there is always violence involved. In fact, in a capitalist society, any single product in front of me in any part of my life right now has some sort of violence behind it. And anybody who's like in a position of like business ownership selling this stuff is part and parcel to that violence. They obtained that wealth through violence. For example, sorry, just to make it perfectly clear. This controller, right? This is a Nintendo Switch controller sold to me by Nintendo via a retailer. Now, initially, like already, part of the violence in that chain is the end state of a wage employee working at Target, right? Their labor is being bought at a rate far beneath what it is worth, which enables a degree of suffering in their life, which is undue. That is violence, right? Automatically. Violence was involved in the sale of this controller. Now, the production of this controller, I imagine a lot of its parts came from Taiwan, probably. And, while Taiwan is a liberal democracy, one of the few in Asia, labor conditions are not perfect over there. They're still a capitalist country, so I imagine some poor schmuck involved in the production of microchips and stuff that go into this controller were also underpaid, making their life a whole lot worse for no morally justifiable reason. That is an act of violence. Additionally, the plastic that this is made of, I guarantee you, in some plastic factory somewhere, somebody is being exploited for their labor in the most overt sense possible. Probably, child labor or sweatshop labor or whatever was involved in making the plastic of this controller, and whoever owns a sweatshop and, the people at Nintendo profit as a result of that because they get the plastic, they make the controller, or they put it together, and then, somebody sells it on their behalf, they get a cut, they make money. That is the violence of capitalism. And This is not to say that you are bad for participating in it. Nobody has any choice right now but to participate in it. You know? But yeah, the long and the short of it is, anybody who has that degree of wealth did make it through violence. And that's something that we ought to change. It's not their fault either. It's not their fault specifically. It is the fault of the system that you have to make your money through, you know, putting up with, cooperating with, engaging in this sort of exploitation.
Legislating factor, but we do consider consent a legislating factor. If we don't agree on that, then that's fine, but I think you're wrong. And many would like us much more comfortable with services laws. We don't really like massive distraction, but you do not know enough about the Europe, basically.
That's a very compelling counter-argument, Carl. I don't want to get into it, but you're wrong. So I don't know. I've seen you try to do this before.
Classic banger.
You believe that sort of nations have a character and you try to fit people into those boxes.
Hey, I'm a genius.
I'm advocating for property rights. In fact, I'm advocating for the expansion of property rights. I don't know if you're actually engaging with any of the arguments.
By the way, quick melee tip, unrelated to the debate. Whenever you're recovering and, you know, you're up against the wall, always hold L or R, because if somebody hits you, you get the wall tech and it looks cool as fuck.
That I'm making here, because it seems like every time I respond
Oops,
to
I'm
a series of
dead.
points today, back up another level and make a different series of points. But that's okay. If you want to concede sort of the idea that market socialism would improve society and your only intention is that passing laws to make private firms collectively owned by their workers seeds.
That's a hard hack's ass to do.
Esoteric idea of German collectivism for your tastes. That's totally okay. What I care about is making society better. I advocate for the expansion of property rights so they apply to everyone who works at a given place. I don't like the fact that our society is controlled by a very small number of people. And I don't like people who justify the fact that society is controlled by a very small number of people by calling those who have lost in this game sore losers. I like democracy. I don't know if I do think about democracy. I like the idea that people should be able to advocate for their own rights. I consider these to be very fundamental principles of liberalism as well. It is often said that socialism is a promise to fulfill the Enlightenment, whereas fascism is a rejection of Enlightenment principles, which is why socialists are themselves very concerned with fraternity, equality, brotherhood, liberty, and fascists don't like those things. I carry very much.
I'm gonna let him finish, and then I'll add a couple of things or critique a couple of things. I don't know.
A democratic society that is fair, that gives everyone a voice, both in their government and in the place that they work. And if you have no empirical arguments against the validity
Switch off Falcon.
of that
You go to Roy.
organization, and would instead rather back up
Yeah.
to some suggestion that I'm violating the English principle of the organization and that actually this type of oligarchy is much better than the old type of oligarchy, then feel free to. That's your way.
So that was kind of a long argument, but yeah, it's actually very effective to advocate socialism on the ground that, like, liberalism makes good promises. Socialism is the way that we deliver on those promises, because capitalism is ill-suited to do so. But there is one thing that is like minor critique, is that fascism actually does believe in some of the values of liberalism. Fascism emphasizes the concept of brotherhood. Fascist regimes are very collectivistic. It is a rejection of other Enlightenment values such as individualism, but, you know, fascism clings very hard to the fasces, the fasces is a bundle of sticks with a hatchet in the middle. The symbolic meaning of that is brotherhood. Together we cannot be broken. And very frequently that is used to justify the prevalence and the supremacy of the nation state over the population. And, you know, included in that is also the power of the corporations to an extent. And, you know, but there is one significant liberal value that fascism agrees with. The rest of that, though, absolutely correct. Most of the values put forward by liberalism, fascism rejects, including equality. Fascist societies are very keen on social hierarchy to such an extent that they have entire sciences, like fake sciences, devoted to justifying it. I mean, like, this is sort of a Godwin's law, but just look at the Nazis. They had all sorts of bullshit race science to say, actually, the Aryan race is the best.
You'll never encounter a civilization. It's wishful thinking at its worst, in my opinion. The idea of an expansion of property rights by violating other people's property rights.
You'll never encounter a society that's as good as you want it to be, so don't even try to improve society. Classic argument.
You could quite easily defend theft. There's no reason why that can't be applied to theft, because that's precisely what we're doing. And the reason that we're doing it is because of repeals. I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, okay, that's fine. You don't have to.
I share the sentiment. Vosh is very funny.
Individualism, collectivism, even though I've just explained it, it's okay if you don't understand. It's okay if you don't want to. But if that's all you're going to say, then I think we'll have to just agree to disagree and agree to be wrong.
Sure. Yeah, I'm okay with being wrong in the eyes of somebody who believes advocating for liberty, democracy, fairness, and equality is fields of fields. You haven't really mounted any substantive counter-argument either to the efficaciousness of a worker co-op-led society, nor, mind you, to the fundamental differences between the legitimacy of this oligarchy that lasts. And I don't know why you've accused me of not understanding collectivism as a concept when I've explained to you that collectivism isn't even relevant to the property rights discussion that you encanced, I guess, ignorant of the fact that I'm advocating for its expansion. But that's all right. I know that you're somewhat averse to reading. This is something you would have to educate yourself on before continuing the discussion. Would you like to talk about immigration? I had a lot of fun researching this subject since our last discussion, and I was pleased to find out.
I'd like to respond to what you've said there, because you don't.
Oh, feel free. Then we can talk about immigration.
You're not right on anything.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Bosch who maybe got the ball rolling. So what we could do is give Sargon a chance to respond.
I'd like to respond.
That's what I'm saying. I was gonna say, if it's okay with you guys, I want to give you a chance to respond, Sargon, right now, and then if after that, if you guys are okay with immigration, I think it's a great segue. Thanks so much.
So, Vosh, you
James-based moderator, facilitator, pilled. Yeah, so that's the direction that the debate's going to take.
literally kept saying the reason that you want what you want is because you'd like to see X, you'd like to see Y, and you believe that this is a way to see X.
Yeah, he wants to make society better.
Go back and watch the video and listen to yourself saying, I like this, the idea that you think collectivism and individualism is not a relevant distinction here is ridiculous. There is no such thing as expanding property. You can't. It's universal. It's inherent in each person by the labor.
Bro. You know, I'm gonna just let him keep digging this hole.
They spent to pick up like an acorn before. That acorn is now my property because of the labor I expended to pick it. Every person is imbued with property because of their ability to create property through their labor. You can't expand property.
Someday.
This is what I mean when I say you're a collectivist, because what I've said there is an individualist perspective. Each individual has rights.
I'm not dead.
You don't agree
got
with
shine.
that. You think that they can expand and contract based on the state, which is what makes you a collectivist. This is why all I can say is we'll have to go on to the next topic. There's no concord here.
No, I'm fine with that. We can move on. I'm glad you agree that people are entitled to vote with their labor, Carl.
Better than anything I could have possibly come up with. Because it is a very socialist principle. People ought to enjoy the fruits of their labor, but in capitalism, we don't all get that.
Yeah, but you don't.
So this is a
You're
perfect
literally
segue.
arguing to take away the fruits of people's labor.
I think that. I know that. Forgive me, Bosch. I know you got another round.
No,
in
no,
this
it's
thing.
okay. It's okay. He counter-argued himself. I don't need to finish. We can move to immigration.
He did counter-argue himself, by the way.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys. It's been a pleasure so far. So excited to talk talk about immigration.
Like the whole part about like workers co-ops and socialism, Foch was essentially making the argument like this is how we maximize the property rights of the worker and make it so that they can enjoy the fruits of their own labor is by giving them ownership, like part ownership of the business such that it is run like a democracy. And then at the end Carl like said, no, but that's what I want. You don't want that. Or like he spent Carl Sargon spent the whole time arguing against that, and then at the end just said like, yeah, I want workers to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So very very funny, very big brain, five head.
Yeah, okay. So,
He you see he always argues both sides so that he always comes out on top. Classic debate tactic, undefeatable.
Sargon, would you like to take sort of the first kick here? Because I was the one who got the ball rolling.
Sure. Immigration has many different layers as to why it's something that should be done with great care and sensitivity. And the left has not done immigration either. But I don't want to just place the blame on the left for the failings of our immigration policies. The right is just as bad. I completely agree with Bernie Sanders when he had a he said it before he cut that immigration is a Koch brothers idea. Open borders are a Koch brothers idea because mass immigration is class warfare.
By the way, Bernie Sanders never said any of that. No meteor cancer? Okay.
Oh, is that?
I think so.
Oh, okay. That's the. Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah. So, immigration is a tricky topic. I don't advocate for immediate open borders. That would obviously be rather silly if we just like drop them all down. You know, of course. Our system, as it exists today, could not handle just infinite number of people coming in. That's ridiculous. What I do advocate for, however, is the sensible, and I'll term sensible in a moment, an immigration where people can come into the country regardless of their race, ethnicity, culture, whatever, and they contribute meaningfully to our economy. They diversify our culture, something that I personally value as an American. Right now, in my opinion, in America, we have a really, really good rate of immigration. Our immigration system is horrible. The actual bureaucracy behind it is terrible, but the actual rate of immigrants coming in seems quite well. And one thing that bothers me is when right-wing people, and this tends to be more scaremonger and say that immigration is well, you said it, class warfare. That there's some sort of broader pawn in like destroying the livability of the middle class to benefit everybody. And while in some respects the wealthy do benefit tremendously from immigration, and in some respects the poorest echelons of society are hurt by immigration, the reality is far more complicated. And so
Yeah, I think a key thing that needed to be mentioned here that kind of wasn't is that anything that changes the economy in any way, like good or bad, is going to disproportionately or comparatively hurt the poor, because that's how the system is set up, such that like we maximize for profit in a lot of ways, but because rich people have more money in the first place, they get richer quicker, while poor people having zero, very little, or sometimes even negative money are oftentimes not helped very much or hurt. And immigration is another one of those cases where broadly it helps everybody. The poor people still get hurt because that's just what happens in a capitalist world, but not really a good argument against immigration, like at all.
Some people, maybe even a month.
And Vosh goes into this in further detail. I just thought it was important to bring up the thing that, like, well, of course, the poor always get hurt by any and everything because they're poor, and, like, in capitalism, it seems like just about everything is designed to hurt people who don't have money.
Among us, advocating for some very silly responses.
Among us.
The proposed downsides of immigration. And that's what I'm mostly interested in. Right now, I think immigration in America, possibly even the UK, is at a fairly decent level. I'm obviously more familiar with the American statistics than the UK ones, but that's my position.
Nice.
I don't care that they contribute to economy or diversify our neighborhoods or whatever. I don't know about those.
Boom. He already conceded the point. Like, Vosh was saying, the reason that immigration is beneficial because it literally benefits the economy, that makes life better for everybody. Sargon just says, I don't care that it benefits the economy and makes everybody's life better. So this is a feels over reals argument.
I find it interesting that it's a really good rate in the US because I think the immigration rate is one of the reasons you got Donald Trump. So get the MAGA cap.
Would you like to clarify that?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is a response to mass immigration.
Why?
Because people don't feel that they are kind of losing their culture and their country.
Okay, so that's a feels argument. Can you empirically demonstrate that
No.
immigration costs?
Listen to what I said. What did I say? Repeat it to yourself.
Are you going to respond?
Repeat what I said. You misinterpreted it. People don't like feeling that they are losing their country. That's an
Okay.
empirical observation. That's not how I feel about it. That's
By the way, this is the same kind of rhetoric that the Nazis used during World War II. In fact, there's an American Department of War propaganda video where they are using this rhetoric to say, hey, the Nazis are bad because they're trying to split up Americans into different categories when all of us are American. And they deliver this message through a Freemason and a Hungarian American fellow standing, listening to this guy talk his spiel about how the blacks and the immigrants are bad and whatever. And then he mentions the Freemasons, and the Freemason who was on board up until that point was like, hey, wait a minute, I'm a Freemason. He's talking about me. And the, Hungarian American guy says, and that makes a difference, doesn't it? And he explains to him, like, this ideology is very weak. They can't conquer a country on their own, so they have to divide people. Good messaging. And a little bit of the mask slipping, if I do say so myself.
what they seem to say.
Well, yeah, that seems to. So can you clarify? Do you mean like they don't like non-white?
Play a
people,
bit of Marth now.
They don't
No,
like...
it's not. They don't like non-Americans. It's not they don't. That's an unfair way of putting it. It's not they don't like non-Americans. But what it is there's been a sustained campaign of mass
Go to the
immigration
previous page.
in most Western countries for about the last 20 or 30 years, and that's starting to have its toll. The social fabric is being eroded.
Can you clarify?
Well, what didn't you understand?
Well, this is exactly what I mean by the far-right pedagogy, where you
Oops.
sort of obfuscate the facts
Wow.
of immigration by alluding to a vague, silent majority that is absolutely disgusted by immigration. I want to talk about facts. I'm not interested in this sort of
Well, hang on.
vague
Okay,
argument.
let's talk about facts. Let's talk about the majority based on.
No. I would like to talk about the impact of
largely on
immigration
immigration.
on the country.
We can just poll people. 70% of the British public say they don't want immigration.
That's not an
Like, that's-
argument.
What for ending immigration?
Wait. So wait. That's literally an argument ad populum. That's a fallacy. Do you think that the argument is correct?
Democracy is an
because people-
argument ad populum.
So you should never
what's the point in
advocate for
giving-
it.
hang
Wait,
on,
you should
hang
never
on,
advocate
what's
for
the-
an
hang on,
unpopular.
hang on.
One second, gentlemen.
Janice.
Hang on.
I'll give you.
What?
I want to. One second. I want to defer to Carl because we were doing kind of that like 1 to 2 minute back and forth, and
Yeah.
totally fair to ask your question, Bosch. I'm just a little bit nervous that I think it was going so well with that 1 to 2
We were
minutes.
doing so well. Yeah, go for it.
I'm kind of if we give maybe
So
you bet go for maybe a minute or two. Thanks so much.
sure, but the objection is the objection to private property rights is that you want everyone to have a voice in society. Violating these will do. But when they do, and when we can just document this, yeah, 70% say we don't want mass immigration, then that's argument ad populum, and they're wrong, right? Even though it's meant to be about giving them a voice. Because, I mean, I think people forget that politics is not based on facts. It actually is based on feelings. And we saw this starkly with the failure of Jeremy Corbyn. You can't, no one knows the future. So we can't say, oh, guaranteed this will happen, guaranteed that will happen. There's one thing we've seen, all of the economic predictions.
There's a lot here, so I think I'm just gonna let Vosh deal with this one, and I'll
And so
see if I
that's
agree or
what
not.
people are worried,
Like,
because they know that
I probably
this
will.
represents not someone who directly, every they take, they can hold accountable. But they want to know the direction in which they're going to go. And so they vote based on whether they feel that the person understands their problems and is in some way like them. And so the most common thing we've heard on the doorstep, according to the Labour MPs or ex-MPs now, who lost their seats, they just everybody don't like Jeremy Corbyn. They just don't like Jeremy Corbyn. They don't trust him. Okay. Why should that not be considered to be a valid proposition for an election? It's not a test. It's about the direction that you make people feel comfortable in which their country is going. It's not, the country isn't an economic project. So saying, oh, this is going to increase the economy.
That is all a country is. At least, if we define country as nation state, that is all a nation state is an economic project. Obviously, if we're using the term country more amorphously to be like just a like very broad society population of people that like meets that scale, it's still an economic project. That's just not all it is. It's also a social project. But,
Well, damn it, who cares?
one relatively insular thing that I could respond to.
Which, man, the idea of
Yeah, people in Vosh's chat are actually counting how many times this guy, like, Sargon, like, makes feels arguments.
Socialist or whatever you call yourself, arguing against closing borders when you admit that the wealthy do benefit and the poorest are hurt is pretty mind-blowing.
So there were a lot of points there. Most of them were relevant. I'm aware that people vote for who they think is right. So again, an argument ad populum is the argument that something is correct just because people believe it. Yes, I support a democracy where people should be able to express their rights. That doesn't mean just because something is popular, you get to default to their opinion in lieu of actually making an argument. I can help you out with that one. The reason why you're defaulting to the general consensus of what you say 70-something% oppose immigration is because you don't actually have the arguments. That's not an argument. That's an argument maybe for passing laws to reduce immigration, but not for whether or not it is right to pass those laws. Incidentally, you were lying to me. 44% of people in the United Kingdom want to reduce immigration. According to this poll, migrationobservatory.oxford.ac.uk, I can post it in the Zoom link if you would like. I don't know where you got your statistic from, but the vast majority of UK residents want to either keep immigration the same as it is or allow more of it. So if we were to speak of democratic majority, Carl, I would be a little more careful with sources. Whoa, hold on, it's okay. We'll get these. So, with that being said, you made some dig at the end about a communist supporting policy. There are 2 points that I'd like to make to that. The first being, as I said earlier, immigration is a very complicated economic problem, and I would argue that immigration actually benefits poor people, though disproportionately less than does the rest of the population. And when I say I would argue, what I actually mean is I have sources and documents to annihilate any counter-argument you have on this. But you can go down it if you would like. But the consensus is that immigration boosts the economy in general, which means a higher minimum wage, which offsets the reduction of wages that are experienced in lower income segments of the economy, which means that the price of commodities.
Yeah, by the way, this is like such a ubiquitous argument. Even conservatives believe this. Like, you have to be further right than like the Bush administration to believe that immigration is bad, which is pretty nuts. I actually remember in political science class, or in like American government class in high school, we were shown like, hey, everybody doesn't hate immigration. In fact, the Bush administration put out these little pamphlets, or like e-pamphlets, whatever, ads, on why immigration is beneficial. Because it adds to the workforce. It actually has a quote-unquote organic, like, that term kind of gets thrown around, but it can increase wages for people who are here. Immigrants contribute more to the economy than citizens do on the net scale, because they still, immigrants who are not citizens still have to pay taxes and such, but since they're not citizens, they don't get SSNs, they don't get like any of the social benefits of being American. Which is unfortunate, really, but it is a strong economic argument in favor of allowing that to continue. And, just at a super basic level, more hands to work means more hands to work. And that's gonna produce more wealth because, people want to participate. People want to work, broadly speaking. They want to contribute to the society they live in.
is reduced, which means that an increased GDP and increased federal revenue means there's more money to go to social programs. There's a lot of stuff. It's a very complicated piece to fly. And as a communist, I want people to be better off, which is why I advocate for immigration, something which empirically leaves people better off. Funnily enough, the people who are hurt most by immigration are actually former immigrants because they have the highest level of interchangeability between their respective labor. So actually, the people.
Yeah, see, this is kind of what I was saying earlier. Where like, anytime anything happens, it's going to be the poorest who are hurt by this, and usually like second generation or like first generation, whatever. Americans, like immigrants, are the most hurt by new immigration because they're in the most vulnerable position to be affected by any economic change. And more immigration is an economic change. But, you know, you could say the same thing about, like, I don't know, a new infrastructure project would also hurt the poor, most likely because it'd be built next to some poor neighborhood and property values would decrease and, like, you know, people would be even further in the hole. Stuff like that.
People who are hurting the most when a fresh, Pakistani immigrant comes to the United Kingdom are the previous wave of fresh Pakistani immigrants. So if you delight at all in their suffering, then that maybe can be some sort of, silver lining to you. Go ahead.
So much.
Yeah, I don't agree with your data. A couple of things in the.
Although, I actually think it's better that Vosh took this line of argumentation. This is a first opportunity I've had in a while to comment on the quality of the arguments themselves coming from Vosh, other than to say, yeah, this is a good argument. I'd like to explore why this is a good argument, is because, like, so far, Vosh has tried to, come at this with empirical evidence at the ready, and I think he keeps doing it. And generally that's a good way to approach the debate. But so far, Sargon has demonstrated not necessarily an upfront rejection, but a very tacit, like, attempted avoidance of empirical evidence. So now Vosh is trying to appeal to his feels, or, like, jab at them, because, everybody kind of understands that he believes this thing that's pretty absurd to believe. And I think ultimately that's a better jab at him than if he reiterated that you're just wrong, that Sargon is just wrong on an empirical level.
Chat. Do you want to just pull them up for me? There's one from Migration Watch and one from YouGov. The YouGov one is people who believe immigration is much too high or a little too high are 63%. People who say it's about right, 22%. 3% say it's too low, and I guess 1% say much too low, and 11% say don't. And then there's a Migration Watch link here. 76% want immigration reduced, 4% want increased. So can you send me through your source? So I can
Yeah, I can. Here you go. UK public opinion. This is from 2020. This is the most recent source, more recent than the two of you, and it's from a
2020. Oh yeah, this was like early 2020 as well, before the pandemic.
So still most people.
No.
39 out of those who have an opinion on it. 39% saying
No.
That's the first point.
39% want it remain the same. Yes, if you count having an opinion on it as only those who want to change it, the majority of people want to keep it as it is. 39% of people advocated for that.
Oh yeah, this is another thing. I feel like I'm actually uniquely suited to comment on this because I have read political science, like, tables and polls and stuff before. When a political science poll like this is when you're looking at it, if the option, like, people sometimes selected was it should stay the same, that is an opinion. That is an affirmative opinion. If they wanted to have an option where you could just defer to not having an opinion, they would add one that says neutral. So what Sargon is doing here is intentionally excluding I think the largest section of people, the largest, like, block of people in this poll, to make his argument look more favorable, because those people say yes, I have an opinion. My opinion is that things are fine the way they are with respect to the amount of immigration occurring. So, yeah, this is a blatant misinterpretation of the data. So when Carl says when Carl says like of the people who have an opinion, he's still wrong, because the people in like there's like red for decrease, gray for keep it the same, and then blue for increase. He's just discounting the gray chunk. He's saying like this gray chunk means no opinion when it doesn't actually mean that.
If you scroll down in the link that I have provided you, you'll see that the bar next to remain the same as it is longer than the bars that don't say that. And that is how I can tell. Also, if you scroll your mouse over it, the percentage
Yeah,
point
but
number
that's
over it.
that's one way of that's one poll and one way of interpreting what you
Nice.
said. But there are other ways. It depends on how you frame the question. But generally, it seems like people overrate.
No, it doesn't
Right.
actually. My poll is the most
Yes, it
recent,
does.
and in
Ah,
addition,
that would've been
your
cool.
poll
Yes,
was
but the
asking whether or not people
question-
felt the levels were a little bit too high.
Yes, okay, this is super important, because Carl actually invoked this as an argument for him, but now he's realizing, we're all seeing that it's an argument against him, that like a lot of times polling data and responses to polling questions actually do depend on how the question is phrased. And the poll that Sargon brought up has a leading question. It is like, oh, do you feel that immigration is too high? That leads you to the answer of like that leads to the default answer being like yes, or whatever, saying yes, it is too high. Whereas, what is your opinion on the level of immigration? Like, too high, should stay the same, or too low? That is not a leading question. There's obviously biases that inform every single question in polling and whatever, but Sargon is perpetrating the more loaded framing that he accuses Vosh of doing here, because he doesn't like that it's not that he is mistaken. It's because he doesn't like that the poll that Vosh brought up is not leading people towards the answer that he agrees with.
That's not the same as asking whether they would want it changed. This is directly asking the point that you were interested in, and it affirms my position. And I'd like to remind, by the way, I'm the one...
Hang on.
I'll stop for you.
I'm
What's
not
that?
going to let you just carry on. No, the polls do not show, right? 44% said they would like immigration to be reduced. That's the first point on that.
Yes, 44% would like it reduced either a little or a lot. Yes.
Then you have this second one, where it's how much remains the same.
I'm sorry, wait, Carl, I'm not trying to...
For the quality of the thing anyway.
Okay.
So you can't just appeal to that.
What?
Yeah, you can.
Wait, you cut out. You roll out voice. You cut out. You
Sorry,
repeat that.
It was a little cutty.
Sorry, yeah, no. You can't just appeal to people going for the status quo because they don't know better, especially in the light of other polls that suggest...
See, there it is. He's saying because they don't know better. He's dismissing the fact that they have an opinion. People who respond to this poll have an opinion. Their opinion is that things should stay the same, and Sargon's response is they just don't know any better. He just doesn't like that they didn't pick his answer. It's not that they didn't pick an answer, they did.
We just arbitrarily don't count the opinions of people.
Yeah, there we go.
The system as it exists.
No, because I'm saying we can't take endorsement of the status
Oh my god, he admitted.
So this one more or less.
No, we take it for keeping it the same as it is, which is what I said. That the majority either
that's-
wants to keep it the same as it is or have it improved.
Or we can say
have
the
it
majority
increased.
wants to keep it the same as it is or reduce it. And more people want to reduce it or keep it the same as it is.
Yet you were the one who came in with a positive claim that the majority wanted to reduce immigration, so I was countering your point.
Let's with
Sorry,
that.
yeah,
Let's go
well,
back to
I
like
mean,
the 2-minute response.
There is the
Sure,
migration watch. There is the migration watch thing that I've linked to you, which is that 70% want it. And then there's the other one that says that 63% think it's too high.
Okay.
So I don't think it's an unfair characterization at all. So like the idea that you can claim like a categorical victory.
Ah, that would have been cool.
One second. I want to give you Bosch, I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but just because Steven had said he just wants to be sure that he gets kind of the broad outline, Carl, of your position on immigration. If you'd be willing to give just a quick outline.
Oh, possibly somebody in his chat.
Back to you, give you a chance to respond. Go for it.
Well, I'll specifically speak in Britain, but basically, I think immigration is a form of class warfare. I think there's a reason that the international socialists and the international bankers and business types that...
Dude, I can practically hear the echoes around what he's saying. The international bankers. It's one thing to say that international banking institutions, like the IMF and the World Bank, they're responsible for a lot of harm on the world stage. It's another thing to say the bankers.
The party...
Like people.
As Bannon would call it. They've all aligned on this because they all see...
Yeah, people...
International socialists
echoing in chat and whatever.
Use immigration to save the world, and the
yeah, he's JQing.
Business interests think that they can use open borders to kill everyone's wages and get. That's why.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, I don't know why Carl saw fit to assign my position to me. I like immigration because I think people should have the right to travel freely across borders. You get one life. I think you should be able to move to wherever you want, enjoy your life. I'm very much for individual rights. I'm very liberal in that respect. Classically, I might say.
Yes, the classical. I love this like facetious attitude of like framing yes. Well, you see, this is actually because this is the classical liberal position. Like liberals were advocates of open borders, believe it or not. So yeah, it is good framing because a lot of people on the right, Sargon included, I think him and Dave Rubin were the two like primary examples of this. Would say, oh, I'm not a conservative, I'm just a classical liberal, and I think the left has gone too far. So him, saying, hey, this is the real classical liberal position, actually, tears down an additional veneer of legitimacy that Sargon previously had, but doesn't anymore.
What this appeal to the interests of the business class are, I don't know if you think the business class would be in favor of me advocating for the seizure of private funds and making them public. The idea that we're like the stooges of the Koch brothers and what have you is fairly ridiculous, but I hear it a lot from Nazbols, so it's a pretty common talking point. In reality, immigration, and again, this is empirical, and I noticed that Carl was very eager to avoid the empirical argument here. He's very keen on argumento ad populum.
Also, it's very funny that, Sargon would accuse Vosh of being like part of the wealthy elite and funded by the Koch brothers or the bankers or the whoever, because that's what the right wing gets a lot of money from the Koch network. I was talking about this on the Dennis Prager debate review, that PragerU, Daily Wire, all those high profile conservatives are not organically funded. They get their money from giant like money making corporations. Whereas the left just doesn't have that kind of money because we're not as amicable to those business interests. And that's not an argument in favor of us being more amicable to those business interests. It's an argument in favor of dismantling those business interests.
The empirical fact of the matter is that countries benefit from immigration. There is a very small reduction in the average wage of the lowest
random downer
of the workers in that country. Very low-level service workers or like agricultural workers.
Some Falco.
That absolutely is the case. However, it brings many
love Falco Fox. Fun matchup.
Prior in this discussion, and with even the slightest uptick in welfare spending, or increase in the minimum wage, or any of the other myriad programs we can use to improve the lives of the poor, we
having trouble finding my footing.
Costs and wages. We more than compensate. We actually improve past that point, and we have made the entire country wealthier, happier, more productive, for literally no cost. Certainly not in crime rates, at least. Here in America, immigrants commit less crime than the native population does. Again, I speak mostly from my...
This is true. I've actually seen studies that prove this. Immigrants commit less crime. Immigrants, migrants, refugees, I think generally, people who became American or seek to become American from another country of origin commit less crime than, native-born American citizens for a key reason, and that is because of the threat of deportation. If a cop catches, let's say there's a family that immigrated up from Mexico, harsh journey, blah blah. Now they're settled. They have a super strong incentive to not anger the law, to not get on the wrong side of the law, because while immigration is not a crime if done illegally, it's a misdemeanor. The punishment for said misdemeanor is deportation back to your country of origin, and that is a really, really bad prospect for most people that move here. So much so that it can even be considered an overt death sentence. And we do this to refugees too. Anybody who was alive in the late '80s for Bush Senior's presidency will remember the Haitian refugee crisis, where the United States turned them away and labeled them as boat people and all that, even though they were seeking asylum. They weren't. It wasn't like boilerplate immigration. It was fleeing a catastrophe in Haiti. In this case, I think a government coup.
Statistics.
But anyways,
this is just unambiguous.
But yeah, all that to say, consequences for breaking the law are worse for immigrants, so they have stronger incentives not to break the law than regular Americans. So that's how that statistic works.
The case. Bernie Sanders' protectionist policies are one of the things I disagree with him most on. I don't think the statistics back it, and I don't think we should mindlessly oppose immigration just because some fat cats also want it. We can deal with them in other ways. Redistributive policies, ways that make the country better, not ways that make it weaker.
Thanks so much. I want to give Carl plenty of time to respond. It's a lot of ideas there.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Right, so you are right. Studies show that it depresses relatives, which is why Bernie Sanders used to be against it. He used to care about it. I find it very interesting that former immigrants in most. That I would have thought on the face of it, that was enough for us to end mass immigration.
Sargon taking a nice unearned little victory lap here.
They see it as increasing profits at the expense of the poor immigrant workers and native, I don't want to say white working class. It's not just the native white working class, especially in America. There are other native, as native as people who are not white. The idea, I love this, the country benefits as the lowest wages go down. So you're exploiting the lowest paid and most vulnerable in society to get the many other benefits of mass immigration.
That's not what Vosh said, by the way. Wages go down as a result of a thing that benefits the country, but wages will go down anyway. Wages going down is not the benefiting thing.
I consider this to be deeply immoral, and I think that if you're face to face with the suffering that you're
By the way, this is disingenuous as well. Sargon doesn't care about wages.
causing, then you perhaps would think that maybe it shouldn't be work the lowest paid in society, so the not the lowest paid can enjoy the fruits of that exploitation. The country is happier and wealthier, but everyone at the bottom is being exploited by the I would thought that was probably what you're trying to fix, considering you're a communist. I can't believe you'd actually advocate.
He's just trying to, like, he's said this point so many times. Like, the entire immigration section of this debate has just been Sargon saying the whole like, immigration depresses wages, which is not true. Wages will be depressed anyways. Like, that, because that's all he has. He's grasping at straws.
But the fat cats are not the only problems. In fact, I don't really care about the financial argument. It is a true argument. I'm more concerned with the fact that we are.
There you go. He admits it. He doesn't care about the argument about wages.
We are cultures with traditions.
And there we go. Mask coming off.
There are definitely places that you can see that immigration has changed that. It's really eroded that. And so you can't reasonably say, Birmingham or London or English cities. These are not cities that tend to follow the English tradition.
What?
And that's concerning, considering that's the two largest cities in England. So I think that people are, I think it's a valid concern.
By the way, this is a tenet of fascism, a very significant one that Sargon is engaging in here is the like fetishization and idealization of a past that never existed. You know, when he says English tradition, I don't know what he's talking about. He also probably doesn't know what he's talking about. Nobody knows what he's talking about because the thing that he's referring to, like, he probably has some vague concept of it, like, doesn't exist, you know? Like, England, in the era that he would, like, you would have to go back to for there to be any sort of English tradition would be unrecognizable to the England today. Like, if you compared the two, they would not be recognizably the same country.
Yeah, okay. So, in the future...
Americans do this too, but our history is not as deep as that. Like, our history doesn't go as far back. So usually people will say, you know, back to the 50s, or the, you know, for some people, the 30s or 20s, with an image of that era that never really existed. You know, white picket fence and all that. That was a propaganda poster that was not anything that really happened.
Future Carl, I would appreciate it if you made arguments I hadn't already responded to. Because your spiel on fat cats and hurting the poor was something I deliberately addressed in my last segment. I notice you have no counter arguments. Did you think the audience would notice?
Okay,
So hold on. You had your moment. Wait, no.
Hold on 1 second.
We could go through minutes of rhetoric, but there's obviously something here about
Wait,
we're saying
James.
that we don't understand.
I understand that he's upset, but
I am. If it's okay, Carl, if I promise, we'll come right back to you to address it.
Okay.
Right. So again, in the future, just pretend that I'm responding to your argument. Like, imagine that you have to move the conversation beyond where you already are. Just imagine in your head so you don't keep making the same argument.
I have to.
But anyway, so I've already addressed about half of your first segment, which was where you pretended that I hadn't talked about other forms of redistributive policies or having comparative benefits, or how immigration leads to an increase in minimum wage and federal budget goes towards welfare programs, and all the many, many ways in which it benefits everyone and only harms poor people in an incredibly shallow way that gets compensated for by other economic factors.
Yeah, and there we go.
The 2 points you actually did deign to make.
I neglected to mention that, but it is good to mention that, like, the chief way that poor people get hurt as a result of, like, tangentially as a result of immigration is depressed, like, well, not depressed wages, but, like, any comparatively depressed wages, like missing out on a raise that they might have otherwise gotten. Anyways, any harm that is done is definitely made up by social services, because as much as the United States has such a feeble social safety net, we do have one, and you know, people do technically get more out of that than they pay into it if they are very poor, and that's by design, and that's a good thing.
Or A, that it is deeply immoral not to care about the poor. I do care about the poor, so this doesn't apply to me, but I do find it funny that you were very keen to dismiss the needs of the poor. Again, like 80% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, and you were the one arguing that any change to the status quo, which is attempting to fix that, is a violation of property rights. So you seem very keen on the poor when it comes to a 2% decrease in wages following the immigration of millions of people, but when it comes to 80% of the country living paycheck to paycheck, not being able to save up money for their retirement, not being able to afford a $400 emergency, you just seem very keen on ignoring that. It almost makes it seem like your issue with immigration has nothing to do with the economy, and you're just lashing.
He admitted that too. Sargon admitted this.
On to that incredibly weak argument when every economist agrees immigration is a slam dunk economic benefit. But that's okay. I wouldn't be honest with my intentions on your position, because your last argument is your real argument, and I'm glad
it's
you
true.
This culture-changing thing. I don't know by what metric London is an English city. The majority of its residents were born in England, which, I mean, even if that wasn't the case, it is within England. It is an English city in every legal sense. I don't know what you mean by not an English city. What is an American city? Is Pensacola, Florida, an American city? Because its culture is very different to Seattle or New York or Los Angeles, which are other American cities. I don't think
it's
we
true.
can determine, actually, what type of nation the city belongs to by the culture of its inhabitants. London is a very impressive city in many ways. It has other problems, undoubtedly, that should be addressed. To call it not English, I think, is, I don't know, a little stupid?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Let's give Carl plenty of time to respond.
I think you haven't done much travelling if you think
Magi.
the country
Up here, down here.
culture of the inhabitants. That's absurd. It's about just them identifying as English. They don't identify as English. They don't consider themselves to be English. They don't follow English traditions. They don't really care about the history of the country, and they don't care about the sort of culture of it. And I think those are things worth caring about. But more importantly, I'm not going to just let you walk away from the fact that you are a communist who is arguing for the increase in billionaire wealth at the expense of the poorest people in society. It's not that it's not even immoral.
No. What? No. As a communist, you would want the proletariat in a country to be as big as possible, ideally, so that when the revolution comes, the bourgeoisie are even more outnumbered. I mean, obviously, that's a little bit of a joke on my part, but like, no. Anything that happens ever in a capitalist system is going to augment the wealth of the bourgeoisie. So this is an argument of like, this is the stupidest possible way to make an argument of hypocrisy. It's like, oh, you're a communist, and yet you live in a world of capitalism. Curious.
Not to care about the poor. That's not immoral to not care about something. It's immoral to exploit them to improve the size of billionaire checks. What? And then the thing is, from this, it drives.
By the way, he also, like I said, he already admitted that he doesn't care.
You to
So this is completely disingenuous coming from Sargon.
violate people's rights, in this case, property rights, whereas we could just avoid violence, not mass innovation. Because this is, as you admit, driving people's wages.
Bosch has a nice sense of humor.
And I'm sure that contributes to them living paycheck to paycheck. If there was
With you know,
market for
see if it's
sellers market labor,
I'm okay talking over this because Sargon is like not saying anything important. If it were like a less interesting streamer, I think this might actually be like, even if the quality of the arguments was by and large the same, this might be really hard to watch. But Vosh is, you know, he's an entertainer, so.
And what you're saying is, right, now we're gonna have to use a
And so is Azan.
I think that this is just
Yeah, so I can't remove earwax. I don't know if you haven't heard me.
Nice.
Explain the myriad ways in which immigration benefits the economy in such a way as to compensate for the incredibly minor. And all the economists who have written on this, by the way, they're very clear to say this is an incredibly minor decrease in the average wages of the lower echelon of our economic activity. I think it's funny, by the way, that you say that immigration is part of the reason why so many Americans live paycheck to paycheck, when every single economic source I looked over indicated that the percentage of people in America who were affected by immigration and had their wages lowered were high school dropouts, which constitute a fairly small percentage.
Wow.
In this country, I think it was around 12 to 13%. 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That's not immigration, my friend. That's capitalism. Because the majority of Americans benefit in terms of wage growth from the existence of immigration. So nice trying to skip on by that one. I don't know what your point was with Londoners don't identify as English. If you could provide me a source.
I actually would need to read up on like how immigration increases wages specifically. I would, if I had to guess, it would be because like that means more laborers and more perceived labor power. So like when people want to unionize, they get more support behind them because there's like the undocumented labor there as well. But I don't know. I would have to read about that. And in fact, I am interested on how that would work. And my camera's been in the wrong spot this whole time, but that's fine.
Like a polling data where
you know what, I'll just move it over.
If they thought they were English or something. Maybe a lot of them said no because they were immigrants. I don't know what that means for the city. It seems like an incredibly weird point to make. I don't know Londoners don't identify as... I don't even have a counter-argument for that one. If you have data, I would be very interested in seeing it. I think London is a city, and it's in England, and most of its inhabitants...
I think London is a city, and it's in England. Undefeatable argument. Debate won instantly. Many people have said this. I'll let him continue here.
Well, it seems like by any metric, the city is English. The reason why I say you can't really make a sort of a cross comparison between the culture of a city and the country it's in is because I live in America. I live in America. We have an incredible range of cultures here in this country. Many of which, and this isn't just an immigration thing, many of which have been in the country for a very long time. From Appalachia to the west to the east coast, to the south to the northeast. We have a huge range of countries, cultures in this country. And I don't know which one of them is American. It seems like there isn't really an American culture. There's no single one. There are just cities, people, and we all live in a border. We try our best to make our way, making our way downtown, walking fast. And London, I imagine, is the same way. I have not been to England. I imagine if I traveled its breadth, I would find that there are different cultures in different cities, not just from London to the west of England, but from the north to the south, from the east to the west, from larger cities to smaller cities. And I would come to the conclusion, as I have here in America, that trying to make some ubiquitous determination as to a nation's default culture and whether or not a city is part of that country because it has that culture, it's nonsense. It's pseudo sociology. You can't falsify any of it. It's just feelings, and I don't like feelings. I like facts. I'm very fact-oriented.
That was a lot of uptilts. Also, yes, I agree with all of Vosh's argument there. There's not even really anything for me to comment on.
And your view, people
What do we got
who are
left?
troops is
Like 40 minutes in this debate. Let's go. Which means probably
in the data.
a lot more.
Let's get the census. Get the census.
I have it up in
What
front
is
of
it
me.
out? And
Sargon's already not in a good rhetorical position here, because Vosh was ready with the source.
in 2011, which was the last one, and this was quite some time ago, after much mass immigration, only 45% of the city identified white British.
Do you believe
Kind
non-white
of makes
people
the point, doesn't it?
can be British?
Bosh, I don't care what you think is racist. I don't care.
Whoa. Okay.
But what I'm saying is
Wait.
Already, like, Sargon made the leap. He, like... This is another thing. Like, Sargon just jumped into the hole. Like, Vosh was trying to be like, okay, so there's a hole here. And then Sargon just jumped into it. You know? Because sometimes, like, when you ask clarifying questions, it can lead people into a bit of a corner where they're like, yeah, what I believe really doesn't look good or is actually really bad. Vosh just started being like, well, okay. Literally, do you believe that non-white people can also be British? Like, in culture, in nationality, and whatever? And then he immediately jumped to, you're calling me racist, because Sargon doesn't believe that non-white people can be British.
Wait,
most
do you
people,
think non-white people can be British?
most
sec.
people in the United Kingdom do not identify as British. In London, do not identify as British. Therefore, your opinion on my opinion on who is and is not British is not relevant, because we're just...
I mean, look, they probably, to be as charitable as possible to Sargon here, they probably identify as Londoners. A lot of times people will, like, sometimes people will identify as, with their city before their country, if the city has a strong identity. But also, I don't believe that it's true that most people in London don't identify as British. Probably, and I know that this is what Sargon means, is that they're not white, and for him that means they don't identify as British. Because, like, oh, there's no such thing as being Pakistani and British, or Nigerian and British. But you can be like culturally Nigerian or whatever and also be British, culturally and politically, you know, be a citizen. Like, I would say there's some things about me and my family that aren't necessarily culturally American, but I still identify it with the political label of being American, you know? Even though I'm not an immigrant, obviously I was born here. But that shouldn't be, either way, that shouldn't be an argument against that.
Asking people how they identify. They don't think they are, and so that's the end of that conversation.
Based on what? Nationality or ethnicity?
Based on their own self-identification.
In nationality, right? Why can't you just answer?
My turn. It's my turn.
All right.
Based on self-identification. And honestly, I don't understand how you don't understand.
Okay. This is another, like, bad look moment for Sargon. He was actually done there. He doesn't say, he actually, like, you can see him struggling to find something else to say. He knows that if he admits that he was, like, done, it, like, opens him up to then have to answer the question that Vosh poses, like, are you using ethnicity as the determiner here? Which I think is what the rest of the debate ends up being, but yeah.
Understand that you keep saying that you are targeting the poorest in society, and you are justifying targeting them for exploitation by saying it's only a minor decrease and everyone must benefit. Why should the poorest in society carry that burden?
Sure.
I think
Captain Falcon versus Sheik. Why not?
should go out in order to not exploit the poorest in society. And I thought I was the catalyst. So you've admitted already that immigration hurts the private immigrants and the Muslims. You have no delay.
Holy shit. Epic Captain Falcon combo.
Right. Okay. So I've addressed the latter point like 6 times now. Yeah. So
No, you
what you're
haven't.
advocating
You
for
address
is Carl. It's okay. You'll get a chance again. What you're advocating for is an ethno state. And I can prove that. I have the data right here. We can actually look at it on my screen. So the number of Londoners as of the 2011 census showed that 63.3% of London's population was born in England, or English citizens. So the majority of people in England
There we go.
are English. You said a minority, as in less than 50%, are white British, which suggests that you aren't counting non-white English people as part of what constitutes an English identity in the country. And this is a problem we ran into the last time we talked. You're advocating for an ethnicity. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're using people's ethnic identity as a descriptive to determine whether or not they are legitimately English. Now, nationality, I get, you know, if you weren't born in England, that's totally fine to say that person's not English.
Double
I think
tip,
that's
man.
valid. Maybe if they've lived there like 60 years or something, but that's getting in the weeds. You're using ethnicity. And I'm going to be honest, as a liberal, as someone who believes in the principles of liberalism, you know, I'm very much big on that classical liberalism. I'm not a big fan of ethno-states, Carl. And it's a little weird to me that you would deliberately sidestep clarifying whether you mean ethnicity or nationality because you're too cowardly to acknowledge the fact that it is in fact ethnicity that you are using as the determining factor in whether or not you consider a person English. You'll note, if you want to go over the census, which I have in front of me, I can show it to my screen too, many people in this census who recorded their ethnic identities fit into a category of either Asian or Asian British. Asian or Asian British, black or black British. The ethnicity section doesn't distinguish between national identity because that's not what it's trying to do. It's their ethnicity. And I would say, by the way, what's my ethnicity? I am Irish and Polish for the most part. And if you asked me what I am, I would say I am an American. Because even though my ethnic identity does not come from America, my personal identity, my
There we go. Kind of what I was saying.
is American. As are many of the English people you are saying are not legitimately a part of England, are not part of the English identity. I don't really have any, I mean, if you want to argue in favor of an ethnicity, fine, I have sources on those too, but is that really an argument you want to be on the table making?
These people don't identify as English.
Ethnically.
These people. Let's see if chat.
Ethnically, you don't identify as English.
I don't identify as American ethnically, but I am
But
still
you are,
American.
whether you identify as it or not.
Do you know what an
Nah.
ethnicity is? This is an ethno state. You're saying a national identity.
I thought chat would do the echoes.
Just because I just want to be
Guess
sure that
not.
Carl gets that roughly 2 minutes or so. And
No, I'm interested. I'd like to do a bit back and forth. What do you think ethnicity is defined as, Rich?
Ethnicity, an ethnicity, not one's ethnic identity, is
What's an
defined
ethnic-
by. I'm sorry.
What's an ethnic?
An ethnic group are people to adhere to an ethnicity, and an ethnicity is determined by a people with a collective culture, nationality, language, heritage. There are a lot of things that can determine one's ethnicity.
Yeah, but that's not racist.
No, I'm not
No.
talking about race. I'm talking about ethnicity. I never said that.
Neither am I.
Uh,
These
all right.
people who are in London, the majority of
That bit is like the weirdest. That might be the weirdest part of this debate, even with all the like crappy arguments that Sargon has made. Sorry, I haven't been commenting on it that much in the past like 10 minutes. 5-10 minutes. It's just like a total non sequitur. Very, very weird.
people in London view themselves as being an ethnicity that does not originate in the British Isles.
Yes, and you are making ethnicity the determining characteristic as to whether or not they are English.
Yeah, okay, wait. By this logic, no white American is actually American, right? Because he says ethnicities that do not originate on the British Isles, which, by the way, is super arbitrary because depending on how far you want to go with that, nobody lived on the British Isles. You know, people had to migrate there. But, you know, in America, white Americans have only been on this continent since the, like, in a meaningful, like, permanent sense, since the 15th and 16th centuries. But, you know, we wouldn't think anything weird about a white person identifying as American. Or identifying as Irish. You know, they could say, like, oh, I'm Irish American, and we wouldn't then take that and say, then you're not American. Same with any black American. So basically, it's an arbitrary, you know, this argument is heavily arbitrary and just based off of not wanting people of a different skin color in your country.
No, they don't call themselves English.
Yes,
They are
ethnically.
making.
No, ethnically.
They
No.
are saying they ethnically do not identify as English. If
And-
they
And furthermore, he's projecting this onto the immigrants that he doesn't like, or like second, third generation, even fourth generation. Who knows?
ethnically identify as English, I wouldn't care where they came from. But if they came, like, this is literally what my grandfather did. Right? He came over here to become English, but they have not come here to become English. I have a problem with that. Why
Wait,
don't we have
you
a
do know ethnicity doesn't mean the culture.
Everybody who moves somewhere, everybody who immigrates to a country, does so to go and live in that country. If you immigrate to Britain, that by definition is becoming British. It's like you go and you live there. You know, even if you maintain all like the whatever aspect of your culture from back home that you want to, that you can, whatever, you're still British. You're living in Britain. You're participating in British society. For all intents and purposes, that makes you British.
Culture you subscribe to, right? Here in America. So again, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, somebody in chat said. Chat said, ethnically British is not the same as British. Like you can be British and not be ethnically British, like white British.
There is the culture
It
and the
can
language
be,
and the history.
but it's not
Yes.
determinant. So
It
you can come here.
can
You can come
be.
here to America. Of course,
Can.
of course it can be. And there are weebs
Can.
who are American
Can.
who are born in
Do you hear
America.
yourself?
Carl, can you stop acting like a child for a moment and listen to the argument that you're going to attempt to rebuke?
Go on.
If you come over
Go on.
here to America, you'll find that there are people who are very much American, who have been here for generations, that are ethnicities all over the place. What's your ethnic identity? I'm Korean. I'm Indian. I'm Irish. I'm Russian. Get this all over the place. People don't really say American is an ethnicity because of the unique socio-political history of our country. But if you ask these people nonetheless if they're American, they'll say yes. And culturally, these people are all the same. They don't. If you're ethnically Korean because your great grandmother came over here in 1940,
I'm alive.
that doesn't mean when you say you're ethnically Korean that you still subscribe to the cultural values of the Korean people. It doesn't work that way. You are.
And even if it did, even if you did still follow a lot of Korean cultures, cultural things and traditions, that doesn't make you less American.
Using ethnicity to determine,
Or it doesn't, it definitely doesn't make you
English
not American.
as a culture or as an identity. You're speaking only of ethnicity.
Yes, 100%. That's how it's determined.
Okay, then you are by definition advocating for an ethno-state.
Honestly, I think the biggest, one of the biggest, this is obviously not a determinant either, but one of the bigger factors in whether or not people, you could tell whether or not people are a certain nationality or whatever, is the language. If you speak American English, well then for all intents and purposes you're American. Even if you don't speak American English, you could have Americans, perfectly American, participating in American society, contributing to the well-being of this country, who don't speak a lick of English, and that is perfectly fine. It's this is such a amorphous and arbitrary concept of determining as a prescriptive whether or not somebody is American or British or whatever. It's come on, this only serves to delegitimize people's status as human beings. That's all it's for.
And what's unique is, I think in this case, it's not because you're racist, it's because you're too stupid to know the definition of ethnicity. You think it means what culture are you a part of?
Literally true, by the way.
If I have the
He is too stupid.
energy to explain to you,
Literally, you read out the words. It can be.
of course,
culture.
anything
Yes, it
can. Can you find
Yeah,
the census data on the identified culture of different ethnic groups? Culture, not their
Yes,
ethnicity or their nationality.
they identify as not being English. I'm not saying it's a
Ethnically, yes.
racial identification. For some of them, it might be racial. That's not my criteria.
It's
But for them, you in America, like I say, it's a unique position you're in. That's why you have hyphenated Americans. They're not just Koreans, they're Korean Americans.
Asian or Asian British,
There is-
Asian or
Hang on,
Asian
hang on,
African.
I-
It's here in the census. You have the same thing.
Oh,
Do you know why?
Shut up.
Let's go.
Can you
Go back
mute
to
him so I
Sargon.
can have my time to talk, please? You have a particular unique circumstance in the We didn't have that in Europe. That's not the same thing.
Oh no, technical difficulties
Carl.
again.
What
No, this is improving his
Connection.
arguments.
is not how it
The
works.
connection.
People who have come
The
here-
connection was just fading for a little bit, so I'd say those last two sentences, Carl, if you could say those.
One more time, Carl.
Sorry about that.
Can we move on? So I'm saying.
Bosh, can you do me a favor and
I'm
give him that
very
whole
calm. I'll
2
chill out.
minutes?
Sorry.
The people who have come here simply do not identify
Can we mute my opponent?
to be in non-English city. I don't want the second city to be in non-English city. These are arguments from
By the way, I think James is actually super good about not muting people, because he's such such a welcoming guy. I think that people, it's just makes you feel bad if you you're not following his rules. It's sorry, I want this discussion to go smoothly. Yeah, no, don't only mute somebody if it's just you and the other person and they're on your stream or whatever. It's okay. Yeah, you're within your rights or whatever to mute them, I think. But it's kind of a bad look unless they're being super duper obnoxious.
ethnicity, that is correct. I'm not saying they can't become English. I'm not saying they shouldn't be encouraged to become English.
Which I don't think Vosh interrupting
Because like
meets
I said,
that threshold, because he's doing so with substantive
about
critiques.
self-identification, about belief, how you feel about yourself. And we are not. There are lots of immigrants who come over with the intention of becoming a part of the historical continuum that is
Ah, damn it.
whatever way you want to describe it. But there are also lots of people who have absolutely no intention. And I
Yeah,
think
so?
that is unacceptable. It's a form of exploitation of the local population. I mean, at the end of the day, the English don't have anywhere else to
What native population?
do if things all go wrong. So I think we do have to be cognizant of that. But finally, and this is the most important thing, you are not progressing, despite you trying to hack the way you do it,
It's-
Right, okay. So first of all, you're lying. American ethnicities are often hyphenated, African American or Korean American. We do that, and you'll find here, and I'm showing it on my stream, in the census for England. This is on London data specifically, but this is the language that's used elsewhere. Asian or Asian British, or for Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, or British or Black British. You know, mixed, white and Black Caribbean. The reason why they do this is because the people who wrote the census know that A, ethnicities are not determinate of one culture, and B, because ethnicities can become mixed and diluted and have more to do with one's identity.
Sorry, you're gonna have to repeat that from. Hang on, I didn't hear you. Sorry. It's a 2011
oops.
census.
That's okay. I'd love to make this point second time. So with here, the 2011 census, we can see the reason why we use terms like Asian or Asian British being put in the same
No, I
box,
shouldn't have Falcon kicked
or
the second
Black
time.
and Black
Oh, well.
British being put in the same box is because the people who took the census or who made the census wanted to make it perfectly clear, and they gave the option to those who wrote into the census that whether you identify as, say for example, Pakistani ethnically or British Pakistani, whether you intend on adhering to the culture of your home country or intend on integrating into the culture of England, those are grouped into the same category because ethnicity is not a determining factor in one's cultural identity, which is why there are Korean Americans here in America who just act like regular fucking Americans, except they I don't know, they seem to be more fashionable in my personal experience. And there are Indian Americans who just act like Americans. And if you go over to England, and I will say this confidently, despite having never been to England, you will find there are plenty of people who, over the past 4 generations, have come from other countries and ascribe to other identities that will nonetheless act British.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, and the reason I'm
See, there we go. You know, people who are, by all intents and purposes, but it's like, yeah, you seem British, even if they're not quote-unquote ethnically British, read white.
capable of recognizing is because I don't believe in ethnostates. What Carl just did, even though, again, he doesn't know what ethnicity means, that's fine, I guess. I'm not going to
Well, should
educate
I
him.
define it?
Whoa. That's fine if he
Your
doesn't
lives are
understand.
too
But
much.
what he's
Your lives are
advocating
too
for, either through malice or ignorance, is an ethnostate. He even made the classic argument at the end there. English people have nowhere else to go, but they can come here.
That, by the way, that was a really good way to maintain the like the aesthetic of good faith, even if a lot of the good faith has sort of dripped away from the conversation, you know, which the fault of which I obviously don't put on Vosh here, because I don't think Sargon is a good faith actor really in any situation having to do with like political debate. But to say like whether through ignorance or malice means that like, hey, you might, you know, maybe you don't mean this. Just, you know, maintaining a little bit of I think performative, but nonetheless optimism of like, hey, you know, maybe it's the case that you're just mistaken. I don't want to attribute to you being a bad person, because that might be an undue label. Nice.
He made the Asia for Asian people, Africa for black people, Western country for everyone. He made the classic white nationalist argument there. But again, I doubt he understands the nuances of the arguments he would have to make in that. So I'm going to back off him there. I don't believe in ethnostates, Carl. I believe in liberalism. You know, I believe that people should be able to defend the country if they want, and that I don't think their ethnic identities going decades or even centuries back should.
It's possible, even necessary, I would say, for a communist to believe in the ideals of liberalism, because that's delivering on those promises. You know, the idea of freedom, of every person having their own property rights. To borrow some language from a political figure who I am particularly fond of, Huey Long, every man a king. You know? It's not fair if there are only a few kings in the world, because that means that there are people who they have dominion over, and that is the source of their life of comfort. I want every man to be a king, and by every man I mean like every person, because that means that everybody can live the life of comfort, and that means that like you significantly reduce, if not eliminate, you know, that'd be probably impossible, the degree of exploitation.
To determine whether or not you consider them legitimately English. I think that's, frankly, quite wrong. If that cinches up the immigration thing, because I didn't hear any.
Hang on. Don't defend
Whoa!
it.
I didn't finish. I'm just advocating for another.
You were about to change the subject.
No.
Let's stick on this.
I'm putting forward the offer call. Do you want to stick on this?
Have you finished talking or not?
Do you want to stick on this one?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Well, far be it from me to step past you,
Have you
partner.
finished talking?
Partner.
Yeah. Let me think of a closing argument.
Then be
here.
quiet. Then be quiet.
Yeah.
If you've
I
got
think
that-
Whoa,
If I
Carl!
remember right, if I remember right, I want to try to remember. If I remember, it might have it Bosch. I think you might have gotten the ball rolling on this topic, if I remember
I'm
right.
dead.
And what we can do is, if you have any final last pithy points to add on to that, Bosch, we can give you that chance, and then otherwise we'll go over to Carl after that.
Yeah, I
And-
think I want a last sentence or two, and then Carl can say whatever the hell he wants. Then we can move to another topic if you'd like. But yeah, final point. Again, I he doesn't know what ethnicity means. That's fine. I'm not an ethnostater. And I think it's fitting then that Carl is so dishonest and disingenuous when he talks about the economic output or the consequences of immigration. It's not because he actually cares about the poor. His economic positions make that perfectly clear. It's because he's looking for a sort of back alley economic justification for marginalizing decent immigrants into this country. It's a very common tactic. People have been doing it for years.
When he hit you, okay, there we go.
So, I mean, Godspeed to him. And Carl, you can go for it.
Nice.
You petulant. I find that really funny. I defined ethnicity for you. I sent you the
I guess I spent my double jump somewhere in there.
definition of ethnic group that we commonly use, with the express purpose of pointing out that this is not about race. Because when you say the ethnostaters, they are talking about race. You know that they are talking about race. They just use ethnostate as a misnomer because ethnicity has been conflated for whatever reason with race. And in fact, it's not specifically about race at all. I will embrace the Dalai Lama's white nationalism. Europe for the Europeans, as he says. I do think that people are ethnic.
Oh my god, he admitted. Sargon saying, yeah, white nationalism is pretty cool. Just because the Dalai Lama said a thing one time. I don't even know if the Dalai Lama like believes the sentiment of the message that he was espousing there. At least I want to believe that he didn't, because you know. But either way,
Peoples are entitled to homeland. I actually do think that's a thing. I think that you couldn't really argue against it because then you're arguing against literally every independence movement in the British Empire. What is this? An Indian ethno-state? What's wrong with the British being here? It's ridiculous. But mainly, this isn't about my consideration. I like the way the Walsh framed it. Again, to claim I'm using dishonest tactics is remarkable. He's not accepting that he's the one who's advocating for persecuting and exploiting the poor and the immigrants in order to make everyone else's lives nicer. And then he's ignoring the fact that, again, it's what these people identify as. They do not consider themselves to be English. Now, I'm not saying
they. That is all.
but I think that when you get to the point where it's the majority of the people in the capital city who don't think of themselves as English, I think there are broader questions there that need to be asked. And pretending offence because that broader question is being asked, it doesn't matter whether you think it's good or bad. There are going to be people who have that conversation. So shutting it down is no good at all. And lying about being liberal, considering they're openly communist, is bizarre. And just
He said the same thing like 7 times or something. I don't know. It's really ridiculous.
Too bad. And just to be fair, because I might be wrong about this, so forgive me if I accidentally said the wrong thing, Bosch. I thought you started, but someone in the live chat said that it was the opposite, that you started the first topic and that
Carl started this one.
okay, so if you wanna do a pithy closing, I can give you that. Otherwise, if you want,
I'm dead.
we could just wrap it up. We can go to the next topic, or like I said, if you want to do a pithy response.
I I'll do a little bit response here. We could do the next topic. I know Carl's positions on transgenderism are incoherent, so
the trans debate.
rather sort of like NPC kind of like pre-coded
What's my position on transgender?
dialogue. Hold on, Carl. So yeah, to finish basically,
Well,
Carl is
hang on,
Carl,
hang on.
Carl, whoa,
We
Carl,
have to
calm
do-
down,
before we go
snowflake.
to the next topic,
Ah,
we agree to some kind of understanding here.
Carl,
I think
Carl,
these kind
my
of
man, Carl.
assertions
It's gonna be
are
your
actually-
turn soon. You'll
I
get
think
the
that
conch, you'll get the
counterproductive
speaking
force.
shell.
So sorry.
You don't know what
Folks,
I think on a subject,
gentlemen.
and you're not even going to ask me.
What I'd
So I
like to
think
do
that
is,
making these categoric declarations is really unproductive.
I think
If you
that,
want to talk more, you can always DM me. I have
I
plenty of
think that
weekends
if
off.
Bosch, if you're willing to, if we just kind of keep the topics in like strict categories. If you're
strict
willing
categories,
to,
yeah,
we
yeah,
can give you a pithy response on immigration,
Pithy,
and then
a
we can
pithy
give.
little response. So, yeah, to put it simply, what Carl advocated for, at least in the first section, there was white nationalism. It's true he isn't speaking of race, he is speaking of ethnicity. That's why the term ethnostate is ethnostate, not race state. Many people use ethnostate interchangeably with, say, for example, white nationalist state, and he wasn't directly speaking specifically of Britain, but then he went ahead and say he agreed with this, the Dalai Lama's proposal for Europeans and Africa for the Africans, what have you, which is, yeah, essentially it's advocating for ethnostates. So he made that rather easy. And again, I don't know how many times I have to keep saying it. I love it when he gives me the chance to, because I'm right, so it makes me look for the good. But
It's true.
immigration,
It'll
even
happen.
with the decrease to the average wage of low-paid workers, benefits low-paid workers. It also benefits the immigrants, because the immigrants chose to come there, usually from poorer countries, in search of job opportunities and economic opportunities that wouldn't have been available in their own countries. We benefit from that. Something like 50% of all patents filed in the past, I think it was in 2017, I would need to recheck the statistic, were done by immigrants. That's an incredible statistic. There's a lot of innovation going on.
that is actually
Everyone
really cool.
benefits. But if you want to keep white people in England and non-white people out, then yeah, I'd be anti-immigration too.
Thank you very much.
Ooh. Cool. Captain Falcon combo.
Because I know Carl wants to clarify something with regard to transgender. By the way, I want to mention, folks, with regard to transgenderism, if you are trans, you are more than welcome here, whether you be gay, straight, transgender, no matter who you are, Democrat,
God,
anybody you want to feel welcome.
I gotta mention this. The discourse has advanced so much since 2020, in I think a really positive direction. Because now just hearing the word like transgenderism makes me like cringe a little bit, because because it's just not something that you should put an ism on, like, in front of, right? Like, it makes it sound like a universal ideology that is applicable to like, it makes it sound like it is a political movement akin to socialism or liberalism or whatever, when it would more be the like trans rights movement, or the queer rights movement, the gay rights movement, if that makes sense. Either way, let's get back to it.
No matter where you are. So I think, and just to preface this one, because I'm like, ooh, this is the one that makes me the most nervous, is I suspect that it's fair to say that both of our speakers, have the same kind attitude towards trans people. It's just that they may have different ways in which they might think that how we can best treat trans people, or how a society can kind of be best off overall. And so I just want to kind of preface that I think this will hopefully go smooth. So here we go, guys. Whoever would like to start, I'm open to it, you guys.
Go for it, Carl.
Sure. I think that unlike most, a person's body is in the process of recruiting that. That means that as a form, an adult can give informed consent. They can modify their body. Please. We don't have
True, based trans argument. However, damn it.
some things like puberty hormones, which, if I recall correctly, are a form of chemical castration, which can lead on to active action. And this one will be done quite young.
No, and no, by the way. What puberty blockers do is they delay puberty. You're not meant to like take them for forever, I don't think. And in fact, we've like it's not like a new thing that's new to us understanding how being trans works either. There are some people experience puberty too early, you know, like at age 9 or 10 or whatever. Like you know, there are some complications that can arise as a result of that. So sometimes it is medically useful and necessary, you know, outside of gender affirmation to delay puberty. So, you know, but also it doesn't castrate you or whatever, because castration has a definition. It's like you get your balls taken off or whatever. That just delays the eventual process of puberty temporarily. But anyways, sorry, let's get back to it.
In Britain, these procedures are not
Very
so
silly.
well developed. They're quite experimental, as are the drugs. We don't know what the
No and no, well, yes, and then no to the second one. The drugs are not experimental. They've been in use since the 1970s and 80s, I want to say. Definitely the 80s. Yeah, no. And as far as the procedures go nowadays, you know, we have quite a bit more data now that a few years have passed that indicate that when there is like a repeatedly expressed desire for transition, and like when there's a lot of indications that somebody is like the other gender born into the wrong body or something like that, that this is a good route to take. Obviously, at their approval.
I think that it's the sort of thing that possibly shouldn't be grooming children into.
By the way, literally any like drug can like by a tiny bit increase the cancer rate. Aging increases the cancer rate. You increase the rate of cancer by aging. But I also don't even believe that these drugs increase the rate of cancer in any meaningful way.
And I think that there's a significant aspect to that. It's led by rabid activists who commanding the dialogue because other people are just too afraid to speak out, or they're actively silent.
Oh, they're too afraid. The classic conservative, like, I'm being silenced argument or whatever.
And something else should be like that. I think it should be something that we encourage children.
Yeah, obviously I agree with Sargon in that adults should be able to do whatever they like with their body. I have good news for Sargon. He's been completely misinformed of puberty blockers. I understand the discourse is shifting somewhat. Initially, conservative people argued mostly against just trans people. And now that battle is being sort of lost slowly, we move now to more what they consider to be indefensible aspects. So here we go. Again, I can provide the link here.
There we go.
Like, puberty blockers are safe, well-studied, completely reversible.
Yeah, there we go.
Medical
And
immunological association.
And reversible too. That's a key thing. Like, if you want to stop, you can stop, and then it's just.
And effective at reducing dysphoria, anxiety, and depression. But it turns out you don't end up having gender dysphoria.
Where's the link?
So this is just a news link, and I can provide like academic citations following that. Dude. Anyway, as I speak, they are essentially quite well tested because they had medical use prior to their implementation as puberty blockers. I take issue with your use of the term grooming to describe like what grooming is.
Oh boy, this really is just a preview of all of the like now mainstream conservative talking points. That like, a kid being trans is actually they're being groomed by who? Who the fuck knows? By the doctor that they go to for help, and then by the doctor that they go to for help after that. If that doctor tells them no, it doesn't matter. The real position is just they don't want people, they being conservatives, just don't want trans people to exist. But they've lost the argument on the grounds, like Vosh said, they've lost the argument on the grounds that just trans people shouldn't exist, like even as adults. So now they have to defer to getting them while they're young. You know, it's the exact same thing, albeit a little bit more like medical intervention is necessary because the nature of gender dysphoria as like a condition of the brain is the same exact like rhetoric used during the 1950s and 60s and you know like however long with gay people, and even now it's like this rhetoric is being used with gay people again, like literally indistinguishable, same shit, different day.
I think this is children who are 10, 11, 12, sort of not quite pubescent, and it is suggested or sort of picked up on that they may have early onset gender dysphoria or indications they might have it in the future. They speak with a psychiatric professional, and the professional can delay their puberty through puberty blockers for a short time.
Yeah, there we go.
Until they make a decision whether or not they actually commit. If they don't commit, they can get off of the puberty blockers. If they do, then obviously they go.
So to be clear, I mean, I'm not aware of what source you're using to suggest that puberty blockers are not a form of chemical castration. Where are you seeing that exactly?
What do you mean by chemical castration?
Well, as in it means they can't reproduce.
Well, they're prepubescent, so no.
Yeah, no, they couldn't anyways. That's just
Yeah, so it is.
Well, it
No.
delays puberty. And so if they're not not indefinitely. It's reversible. You just stop taking them.
yeah, only for as long as you take them. You're supposed to stop taking them eventually.
I think that is
Sure.
the case, like a half inch or an inch or something.
But I guess I would have to go and look it up because I've got lots of sources.
Now hold on. If you have lots of sources, you wouldn't need to look it up
It is, but
because you already have it.
I can't.
But yeah, okay, tacit like just leaving well enough alone. I think would do well in this scenario, which Foster does.
Well, bottom surgery, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm probably not in favor of sexual reassignment surgery for children, even if they're absolutely 100% trans and have gender dysphoria. That's probably something we should because the reversibility of that condition is significantly less than the reversibility of other, like, preemptive stages at that point. And there are lots of trans people who are comfortable keeping the genitalia they were born with, and that might be a decision they would hold off on until they're sort of old enough to decide what consent was. I could maybe
Yeah.
there are good arguments.
And additionally, one thing about that is we can construct like, well, I think they're called neo-penises and neo-vaginas and whatever for people who want to go through with bottom surgery. But the technology also isn't quite there yet. It's getting pretty good pretty quickly. But you know, some people prefer it, like one of the things that has come more into the discourse lately is that genital preference and sexuality or gender are not the same thing. Like you could be a straight straight cis white guy like myself, like conforming to gender roles in every manner that you could really be, but also have a genital preference for dicks. So then that would lead you to be more attracted to trans women than cis women, I guess. Yeah, just a little thing worth mentioning. I think relating to the. Yeah. Sorry, there's a little bit of a tangent.
Arguments for them to be able to do it at 16 or something. I need to read those though. Right now,
I mean, I fully agree with your argument. I think that's a very well put argument actually. But I really think that essentially there seems to be deliberate attempts in order to make children who are not certain about themselves. I mean, a lot of children are not to get them to identify as trans. When it's being promoted by media outlets, things like this, this is what it becomes trendy. It's like a trans trendy. I think that, there's probably an argument against making transgendering cool and popular. You realise that it's not easy being trans.
Okay. What he's doing. Okay. So first of all, two things. Or there's two things. First of all, he's like, this is the classic like rejection of like treating it as a fad or whatever. This will never catch on. When it's not a fad. Like and secondly, the reason that it seems like there's so many more people coming out as trans lately than there have been in the past 5-10 years, whatever, especially relative to the time frame of this debate, is because now it's now we've decided that it's more okay to do that. We've lifted the impetus for people who were trans but were closeted. It's the same thing where like, oh well, there was no gay people in, I don't fucking know, 1950s America. Yeah, that's because being gay was treated as a mental illness and stigmatized to the highest level possible. So gay people were not seen. They existed. In fact, there are probably about as many gay people now as there probably were as many gay people back then as now, amount of trans people then as now. The difference being they were just shoved into the closet.
That you're going to have a lot of other problems in your life. But I think that
it would be like if it's very cartoonish, but like if in stigmatizing being black, instead of doing what we actually did, we just painted every black person's face white and said, oh, there are no black people. See, look, this guy's face is white or whatever. And then all of a sudden it became like more acceptable to not wear the face paint. Like they've always existed. You just put the mask over them.
Erring on the side of caution and prudence with such a serious concern, a serious life event, is probably wise.
So a few points here. Grooming is the act of preparing a child for the intention of committing a sexual offense. Seeing as how nothing about the process of treating transgender children is a sexual offense, it seems like a weird word to use. I have seen, and I have looked into this, it's come to this. I have seen no evidence of there being this broad conspiracy for the media and schools to trick children into thinking they're trans. What I have seen, and I will concede this point, is that there are some trans-oriented psychiatric or medical institutions that have maybe been over-prescribing diagnoses of gender dysphoria. But we over-prescribe everything. At least here in America, everything is over-prescribed. I swear to God, everyone.
These live? Never mind. Not even Fox can live that.
So I don't know if this is part of like some conspiracy to make people trans. And it speaks to an earlier point that you made too. You said like these organizations are being.
And by the way, I want to add something that it's actually, as far as things that you could over diagnose, gender dysphoria or and that sort of thing is not as bad of a thing to be over identifying or over diagnosing, because so much of transition is social transition and then maybe some puberty blockers, which are reversible. Like at any point, if you realize, no, actually this isn't what I want or who I am or how I want to live my life, you can just go back. If you're a guy, maybe you'd be a few pounds slimmer, you'd be a little bit shorter, but really no meaningfully harmful consequences, I don't think, outside of oops, I made a mistake and I'm just trying to figure it out.
Are falling to bias from
and
groups, but I haven't seen.
And probably also a bit of money that's left your pocket because of how healthcare and insurance work in the United States. But that's a motivation on the part of the insurance companies and doctors very overwhelmingly are still like steadfast in their profession. So
Seeing that as well, and that seems like the refuge of the anti-intellectual. When the data disagrees with you, you back up and say that the data isn't real data. Actually, it's just being sort of cajoled there by the weight of activist groups. And real scientists would disagree with it. When, of course, in reality, the scientific community pretty much has a consensus on the issue.
oh, he's frozen again.
Oh, yeah, we got you.
You went a bit rogue, people. I think I totally disagree that there was common trans activists but I think common trans activists.
Marth's tech wall jump is really bad.
I think that given the decisions that we make, like even any kind of chemical treatment, these chemicals do give increased risk of cancer. Let's assume that they don't catch it right. Let's assume they don't. There's still other negative effects of movement like prostate. It's not generally favourable to do. And so if we're over-prescribing things, over-prescribing paracetamol, not so bad. Over-prescribing hormone treatments, probably. Again, I think it's something we should be more prudent about. I totally stand by that use of the term group as you described it. But then I guess I'm not as woke as you.
Oh yeah, HRT as well, like hormone treatments. I forgot to mention that. You can stop taking those too. Yeah.
Well, no, it's just
And like that's reversible too. So this is really not an argument.
actually incorrect. To groom a child is to prepare them for sexual offense.
Yeah.
Do you think that providing medical care to a trans child is sexually assaulting or molesting them?
Well, when you say sexual offence, I think that can be expanded to include things regarding their sexuality that aren't sexually offensive.
So how exactly?
I think that there are definitely, there are definitely a sizable number of young men who are effeminate and gay I do think it is groomed into believing falsely that they are actually women in men's bodies, but they don't agree. No, it's not they don't agree, they're confused. They're persuaded into it and then come out of the other side, hopefully before they've had the surgery.
This is a whole lot of narrative for not a lot of receipts on Sargon's end.
Medical intervention in transgender adolescents appears to be safe and effective. It's from San Francisco. I don't know if that city is to SJW for you or whatever. There is no evidence to my...
actually.
Well, then you're free to dismiss all the credible academic and scientific evidence that comes out.
Well, that's the thing. You say it's credible, but I'm
Wait, you're
currently
literally going to
concerned.
dismiss evidence because it came from San Francisco? I was joking about this.
Oh my god, he admitted. Oh no, robot. Leftist audio.
Right, so what you're describing right now is
I
anti...
don't know if I'm
Yeah,
not sure
wait,
if the audience.
Carl, are you
hold
here?
on. One sec. I don't know if the audience heard you, Carl.
Impartiality and reliability.
Carl.
Evidence,
Carl,
and it's the same principle. It's
Whoa.
ideologically
It's-
and can be cherry picked and groomed itself.
Carl, you were literally arguing against the
not
concept of empirical research.
Wait 1 sec. I couldn't actually hear Carl, so I just want to. I think my audio, what I'm hearing is I think it's going out on OBS. I just want to see Carl. Maybe just those last like probably like 3 sentences were his robot-y.
Yeah, James, I can summarize. He said that when evidence disagrees,
How about you let me summarize my points?
you'll take twice as long, but go for it.
Well, I think that these people are deeply ideological. I think that everyone following
Yeah.
the transgender is very ideological. And same with any kind.
This is all projection, by the way. Sargon is calling people who support trans rights ideological when he's the one who, in spite of the evidence, is objecting to the concept of people transitioning from a younger age. Like the evidence that, yeah, it is safe and, you know, kids can generally tell, parents can generally tell, and when there's extensive consultation, blah, blah, it's all well and good. Him objecting to that, objecting to kids coming out as trans, is ideological bias on his part because he's rejecting empirical evidence to the contrary.
kind of ideological.
In fact, it's pretty extreme ideological bias.
Group, in my opinion. If I were to present studies from Nazi Germany that suggested that actually, the internet does deserve you would say, well, okay, you may have what appears to be evidence in the hand of X. However, I don't trust the way in which it was gathered. Now, it doesn't mean that the actual process of gathering the data is wrong. But what it means is the things that are being collected, the editorial bias in the information in what we are looking at. We don't have time to go through another study. So I'm not just going to accept a study from California transitioning appears to be safe and effective.
Yeah, this is literally just anti-intellectualism.
Yeah.
Essentially, if a study provides, wait, whoa, holy shit, Carl.
Hold on. I think it might be that Carl's connection dropped. I don't know if he was done.
Medical boards saying,
When, well, so sorry, Carl.
Untested.
Carl, I don't know if you can hear me.
Frontier, and we're going. Those are two
Carl, I'm so sorry to stop you. We totally can't hear you.
Yeah,
Is he still going?
I can't
I don't think he can hear us. Oh, sorry, Carl. I think the connection.
Sorry. Start.
I think it was the last like 15 seconds, to be honest.
Yeah, sorry. I couldn't hit. The voice started talking, and then it started roboting.
Okay, so yeah, I think it was like right around there. We couldn't tell if you were done or if the connection was getting weak. If you want to give a chance to give those last 15 seconds, so we can give you that 15 seconds.
Yeah,
Oh, jeez.
I would need to
15 more seconds of Carl just saying anti-trans bullshit.
obvious.
Bruh.
Are we good? Okay, so what Carl's describing here is literally like the height of anti-intellectualism.
Yeah.
We can set aside ideological differences for a moment. I've argued with him at very different ideas than I do, obviously. What he did was he saw a study and he found a reason to not believe it, and then he decided why he shouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
The Nazis were an organization that had empirical evidence of having engaged in biased research. Additionally, even if you look at their research itself, the bias was evident in the text. Carl has not looked at this particular source nor its methodology.
True.
But he's decided, in spite of having provided no evidence in favor of his point, that there's this conspiracy to deliberately groom children into being trans. He's decided that this one it doesn't agree with him. So why pay it any mind? That's kind of how he handles most of his engagement with research, and that's one of the things that frustrates me. There's actually no point in having this conversation, much in the same way that I probably wouldn't waste my time arguing with a flat earther or like an anti-vaxxer. It's because I'm only capable of engaging in scientific discussion of scientific topics.
You know, this is just foresight from the future. It's funny Voss should say this here, because I have seen debates of his where he like argues against anti-vaxxers because when the COVID vaccine first became a thing, a lot of people were very keen to reject it, which is very unfortunate, but you know.
If people believe fundamentally in the concept of empiricism. But Sargon of Akkad, and he does this, he has now asserted that there is a conspiracy to groom, again, a misappropriation of that term, young children into being trans. He provides no evidence of this. He rejects evidence to the contrary, and then he says everybody involved in the trans issue is highly ideological. You can't trust it. Meaning that there is no evidence that would sort of persuasion. He's an SJW, essentially. He's a person who very fiercely and emotionally believes, a very strong conviction to his values, and he'll scream and he'll throw his arms around. But at the end of the day, the reason you can't really get through to this person is because they don't believe in the concept of empiricism. They don't believe really in being.
I hate Peach's down smash. Fighting against it. There we go.
I'm totally okay ending the topic right there. I provided sources to back my point. I haven't seen any counter sources or even arguments in favor of it. And Carl, if you want to have like a last word on these questions, that's fine. If you want to shit slay, if you want to shit slay, just come on my channel. We can throw aside the debate format.
We can shit slay.
We can just laugh
Yeah,
and
yeah.
laugh and laugh. But when I come in
will.
for like a formalized debate with a moderator, I like it when my opponent believes in the concept of evidence. So go ahead.
Well,
Right.
All right.
I'm sure you can. Right. So I
And just
I
a
would
final
say
bit of
that
projection. Beautiful.
Take what Vorsha said about
From
the
from
seriously.
Sargon.
For example, ask yourself, why did he choose the first
Sunday.
Google search for a poll that agreed with me? This poll agreed with me. End of the conversation. There we go. I've got two polls that don't agree with him, but why is
That was not the end of the conversation. He explained at length, Vosh tried to explain at length why Sargon's interpretation of that poll was highly erroneous and how his poll actually was flawed because it incorporated a leaning slash leading question into its methodology. So basically, you get fucked because you don't understand the concept of why bias makes research bad.
why are they not relevant? So it's Vorsha's doing exactly the same thing as accusing me of doing. I'm not saying I don't think it's conspiracy. I'm saying Vorsha's lying.
Classic.
However, he knows that it sounds conspiracy. Oh my god! I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. There's a movement. It's an active cultural movement. They're very about this. They have websites and advocates and legal representation. And this is a movement. It's not a conspiracy. There's no need for any of this to be hidden. It's all being done in the open.
Yeah, I feel that.
Doesn't seem to understand, and in thinking that he can apply appeal simply to the science. The science isn't settled on this issue. Like I keep saying, that's the problem. We are still unsure of what the long-term consequences of all this is.
Dude, the science on gravity isn't settled. That doesn't mean we should discount the concept of gravity and our understanding of it. This is currently our best understanding of how transitioning works. Well, not even currently. This 2 years ago, this was our best understanding of how transitioning worked. And it seems like after more studies in the 2 years since this debate happened, 2.5 years now, it seems like that understanding at its core has held firm. So it's that much more settled now than it was then. This is like if I'm being charitable, this is a poorly aged take, but it's also realistically it's more just disingenuous and misrepresentative.
Because it's also new, and there seem to be some very.
And again, this is the anti-intellectual bias because he takes a science or a study that he already disagrees with, and he's just looking for an excuse to disagree with it. Sargon is.
Bad long-term consequences, which I think probably helps to account for the 40% suicide attempt rate in the trans community. So I think that being cavalier about this and shouting down people or misrepresenting them and trying to describe them as essentially evil, which is what Vorsh has done, is exactly the kind of problem I'm talking about.
He didn't do that, but they are evil. He didn't call you evil, but you are evil. So just gotta clear that up.
It's exactly why I would use the term grooming, because this can be, I can emotionally resist this because I know how much of a joke Vorsh's opinions on these are, but a young person might not and might be intimidated into it, especially if it's not just one person doing it. Everything and everyone is ideological.
By the way, this is also projection. Him saying that people will be quote unquote intimidated into transitioning is actually the opposite of what has historically happened. People have frequently in conservative households, you hear horror stories about this, that they're often pressured away from transitioning when they're very certain that there is a mismatch between their gender identity and their more presenting physiology.
If the radical left is to be believed on in any way.
Ah, yes, the radical left. That's me. I'm the radical left.
Back when I first started, not really understanding that point, and it has been through long study that I've come to realize that they are correct. That everyone is in some way ideological. To say that they're not means that they just don't recognize how they are ideological. These studies, undoubtedly, I would have to go through. I don't know they're all wrong. I didn't say they're all ideological. However, I think a lot of them are, and the ones that are.
How long is this going to go for? Okay, a minute and a half.
Jeez.
Longest minute and a half of my life, probably.
yesterday, I believe it was, that was specifically talking about an academic who was getting her work shut down because she was just researching into trans issues, and she was finding answers that the trans community online didn't like.
I think that was Deborah So, and it was because her research was full of shit. Like the methodology was super bad. The conclusion was basically assumed from the outset, and it really just produced like a lot of harm. It would have produced a lot of harm if that sort of if really bad research like that, especially on an issue as touchy as trans rights, was legitimized by peer review.
And various points of pressure were being put on the faculty and establishment she worked for. So yeah, I think there is actually a kind of you could probably argue is it too strong, but I think in effect it amounts to it in at least some of the cases. And because of the seriousness of
I
this,
don't fucking know what.
I don't think any of the cases should amount to grooming. But then I don't think that any of the workers in our country should be exploited through mass immigration. So, yours.
Okay, more conservative bullshit, I
Thanks
guess.
so much.
It's such a word salad.
I was curious why he talks like that. You would have to
Let's
too if
see,
you didn't have any evidence
just
to
so
back
we
up your
don't
claims.
have to.
Yeah, it's true.
1 second. Just to go into the Q&A before there are any more.
All right, so this is the Q&A section then. So that means I am done with the stream. Thank you for sticking around. I think I only had one viewer this time. Yes, sir. You've been a real champ. I mean, I guess shout outs to all these people. Shout outs to James for being an epically based debate moderator and facilitator and host of Modern Day Debate, and General Giga Chad. Shout outs to Vosh for substantiating the arguments, and shout outs to Sargon of Akkad for digging his own grave on basically every argument that he made in this debate. That was an hour 47 minutes of debate, and I stretched it out into 3 hours and 6 minutes. I think that qualifies for transformative content, and this is a couple of years old, so hopefully it's not view stealing either. But yeah, I'll be back. I don't know if I want to stream tomorrow or if I want to hold off till Monday. Either way, I will be back in the next day or two. So, and I should have a segment coming up.